All right, all right. Looks like we're starting up right now. I'm gonna wait a few minutes for people to come on in. Just chill, relax, have fun right now. We're gonna have a good conversation, I think, hopefully, about. Hang on, that looks like it's all wonky on my end. There we go. One of my all-time favorite Dune books of all time. Dune, I should say. Where is the party happening? Someone pass up. Oh, we're gonna have some popcorn right here and probably some spice as well, ideally. Greetings, Earthlings. All right, so it looks like we have some folks joining in. I'm gonna have this meeting start nice and slow before we get really into the meat and potatoes of this whole situation. So until we really get lost in the dunes on this little stream. Welcome everyone. We're gonna be talking about Dune today. Dune Part 2, Dune Part 1, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and a lot of people who don't seem to understand what Dune's about. But first we're going to let you guys get in and collect yourselves, discuss some fun stuff. How's everyone doing tonight? You all have a good night so far? Ideally. There's no spice, there ain't no party. Yeah, there'll be some spice. In fact, I have some spice with me right now. This is a little bit of a spiced old-fashioned. No melange in this, unfortunately. Just good old homemade cinnamon syrup, but if you got something to have, it's a good time to have it now. Dune Part 2 was movie of the year. Yeah, I would say it's fair. I think there's a few contenders, I think, in the year that could rival Dune Part 2, depending on how Robert Eggers' Nosferatu fares. That could be a good contender. I think Dune Part 2, though, is probably so far my favorite movie of the year. But, again, as the Necromancer said, I live again. Yeah. I almost thought you said Neuromancer there, Typhoon. Neuromancer, I just found out, is getting a movie adaptation. If you haven't heard about that. Okay, let me bring this up. That's another one of my all-time favorite science fiction books. Yeah, let me bring this up right here. Apple TV. Bringing back Neuromancer. If you guys haven't heard, Neuromancer, it's one of my all-time... Dune's definitely my all-time favorite sci-fi book, but Neuromancer's up there too. It's the origin point of all cyberpunk, and apparently Apple TV is making a drama series they're calling it based on, as opposed to what it should be, which is cyberpunk. Yeah. But, 10 episodes. Okay, so I'm a little nervous because it seems they're treating it like a Tom Clancy story, but I mean, that's probably fair. Yeah, Robert Eggers is one of my all-time favorite directors. Just like The Witch alone, he had me sold, but with the Northman and The Lighthouse, those two I think are just fantastic. I feel like a converted atheist. I wasn't a fan of the first Dune, but then I watched it on IMAX, and now Dune Part 2 is my favorite movie of the year. Yeah, that's valid. You have been drawn into the cult of Muad'Dib, and you can join his terrible purpose and his jihad soon enough. But that being said, for better or worse, they are people who may unironically see themselves as part of that choice. Welcome everyone. Come on in. I was just looking at. So yeah, it looks like so if they're doing Neuromancer, hopefully do the next couple books in the Sprawl trilogy as well. That'd be pretty good. William Gibson's pretty fantastic. I still have to watch Dune 2, so I'm guessing I should bail as this is likely to go into spoiler territory. Yeah, this will be spoilers. But if you want to give us more views, just leave the stream running and keep it on mute so I can get the, I'm just kidding. That's a terrible thing. Watch Dune Part 2. That's more important than my stream. Dune Part 2 is a fantastic work of art, and I think it's superb. Not a fan of Apple TV. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Apple TV either. That's one I don't actually have. So I may have to get Apple TV just to watch a Neuromancer film, a series. So there you go. All right, I'm gonna stall for a couple more minutes before people come on in. This has been a couple of wild days, though, hasn't it? Like beyond just Dune Part 2, we have a couple weeks ago we had the Crow remake having its disappointing content. I guess is the only way of putting it. Yeah, Dune, the Crow looks really disappointing. I'm really upset how that's turning out. But we got Dune at least. Dune 1 and 2 have been some of my favorite movies in theaters at this point. Yeah, same. I think Dune Part 1 and 2 are just fantastic experiences. And I think, if it keeps going like this, we're going to get Dune 3, and it's going to be, Dune Messiah, and it's going to be fantastic. I'm excited. I am very excited. Dune Part 2 this Saturday with a friend this time in IMAX. Oh yeah, I feel like this is an IMAX movie. I might shell IMAX out for this or Godzilla X Kong. I feel like this is gonna be the better of the two films, though. I'm just a hunch. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe a slight hunch there. All right, so I guess I should talk about how I think about Dune Part 2. First, from a non-spoiler territory, and then a spoiler territory, just to give you some context before we get started into really bad takes about Dune. First and foremost, Dune is my favorite science fiction novel. I think I've said it before. I think there are science fiction novels that are more compelling, more exciting, more thrilling, but Dune gets every single component of great science fiction collectively, all in one little place. It gets the world, the complex ideas about life, the theories about existence, the interplay of politics, religion, business, industry, and war. It captures this really interesting criticism of colonialism. It's just fantastic. I feel like I'm going to be disappointed in Godzilla X Kong just because I watched Godzilla -1. Yeah, this is going to be no comparison. Godzilla X Kong is going to be fun, but it's not going to be intelligently or brilliantly written like Godzilla -1 was. Anyway, so Dune Part 2. As a fan of the books, I thought it was fantastic. I do not think it is flawless, but I think it is fantastic. And I think what it gets right is the sheer scale of the story. It really captures Paul's terrible purpose very well. I think that the changes that they made largely benefit the story, though there are a couple things I'm just a little disappointed about, and I'll get to that in a minute. I think that all the acting in this movie is incredible. I think it's some of the best acting in science fiction we've seen in decades. I think really since maybe Arrival or Gravity, probably. I think that probably even further than that. I think that for me the big standout performance though had to have been Zendaya as Chani. I think she was fantastic. Also Javier Bardem. How can you not love Javier Bardem in everything he's in? He's just fantastic. I think he was great in this movie. I think he was really used well as at first comic relief, but like this kind of like a paternal, warm figure. But then as time went on, you realize you saw the fanaticism come out. And it's just an incredible performance. Lady Jessica, I think, in this movie was really interesting how they handled her. Because she takes on a much more insidious role than in usual adaptations, which kind of caught me by surprise. Usually they kind of tone that down a bit. But they really play up how the Fremen are really manipulated by the Bene Gesserit and intern Paul. They really play into that whole thing. I think that really benefits the movie as a collective whole. I think it's incredible. The performances in Dune Stellar, yeah, these are some of the best performances I have seen, period, in a very long time in any science fiction film. Austin Butler, freaking fantastic as Fade says Fade. He was just terrific. This is a great. I see a lot of people comparing him to Frieza from Dragon Ball Z, and I'm like, I can't unsee that now, complete with like the bald white head and everything. I think that's great. A couple things I didn't love though about Dune Part 2. And there are a couple things I didn't care for. Mainly as fan of the book. There are a couple adaptation choices I felt like didn't service the story as well. Like, well, maybe it serviced the story of the film, but I kind of wish there was more. I'm upset there's not enough Mentats or the Chom Navigators. I really wanted to see that. Like, I think like I think that by focusing on the Bene Gesserit, the political factions, the war, and the Fremen story, it services Dune very well, but I still want to see that Mentat stuff. Thufir was cut out of this film. I kind of was hoping I'd see more of him and how his capture affects him and how he believes Lady Jessica betrayed House Atreides. I think it's a really cool dynamic. They cut him out. The Chom Navigators would never... We have not seen a Navigator in this iteration of Dune yet. Again, they appear in Dune Messiah, but... what are those? Mentats? Weren't those like the knockoff Mentos and Defa? Kinda. So Mentats in Dune, they are... Okay, so the Butlerian Jihad in Dune has it so that all of the computers were eradicated from society, because in the world of Dune, if you over-rely on technology, the computers do the thinking for you. So Dune's whole thing is about self-reliance, teaching yourself to become better. And as a result of that, the Mentats are essentially the counterpoint to computers. So computers do thinking for you, the Mentats compute, and coalesce thoughts, and they're able to make calculations in a blink. Paul is a mentat in Dune. Like he has mentat capabilities. His brain is like a living computer, and he's been trained to develop that split thinking. That helps with his strategies and things. That helps with all of his numerous abilities. And the mentats in the first Dune, they appeared, but they were very minimalized. Thufir has like a moment with his eyes roll back. He has a calculation. Piter kind of gets neglected, which is a shame because Piter is one of the best parts of the 80s version of Dune. What was the image of a bunch of girls that flashed? So that image, that's another wallpaper behind my screen. So I was actually Pokemon champions that you saw. So there's a couple of different wallpapers I have going on. It's nothing to worry about. It won't drive you too crazy, hopefully. So yeah, lack of mentats bothered me, and the lack of the navigating guild. So Chom not having a big role in this duology so far. I feel like they're really interesting dynamic because it indicates the business side of spice production. It indicates how people use spice as an industry, and that was kind of cut out of this film. And I thought that could have been a really good interplay, because part of the reason why Paul does win in the first book is he manipulates the economy of spice. He's able to manipulate the sense of, spice. If you control a thing, if you can destroy a thing, you can control a thing. That whole theory. And Paul uses it to his advantage against the navigators in Dune, who are just as powerful as the Bene Gesserit in their own way. Not quite the same. The Bene Gesserit use politics. The navigators use mathematics and all that, and space travel and transportation. But it's a major part of Dune that these films so far have kind of neglected to mention or focus on. Can we see your wallpaper collection, or do you not want to have a voucher? I'll show you my wallpaper collection. 1 second. It's all basic. It's all pretty tame stuff. Let me get the pictures up for you. 1 second. Some of my wallpaper. Yes, I have a folder on my computer that has it. Here's a couple. Here, let me show you a few of them. I'm putting it on the screen right now. So it's all very tame and nothing too serious. So I have some artwork, a lot of it's very old, by the way. Some of this is from my college days. Yeah, some of it's very old. And what I used to do was I would just blink by, and just some cool little things. But I've been using Wallpaper Engine because I like the more dynamic visuals of it. I think nothing should be inappropriate on here. There might be one thing that's like a horror wallpaper that's a little weird, but it's all basic stuff. Different things I like, different fandoms. Just a bunch of some more than some old. This is the one. This is what you saw before. The champions from Pokemon lined up. Some really cool stuff. And yeah, just basic fun artwork. Some better than others. Yeah, there we go. I think that's everything. Yeah, different thing. Some very old, by the way. Some of this is back from high school me that I collected. You probably tell which one's a which. All right. I think that's about all of them. I think that's, yeah. I won't get rid of that one that I just passed before, but nothing too strange. But the animated ones are much better. I like the wallpaper engine a little more. Anyway, I have spicy wallpapers myself. Well, I have spicy wallpapers right here. Here's my spicy wallpaper. Anyway. So yeah, I overall thought that the new Dune movie was fantastic. I thought it was an incredible film. I do think, though, that it has a couple flaws of adaptation, but internally in the logic of the film, it flows magnificently. The only issues I really have are from the perspective of a book fan who would have liked to see some of his favorite parts of the book adapted. Hearing your keyboard was worth it. Yeah, I love my clackety-clack keyboard. Fantastic. I love it. I don't want to hit the keys too much because I don't want to knock the stream offline, but there you go. But there are a couple. So, having said my general thoughts on Dune Part 2, I do want to say what I've been noticing online the last couple of days since the movie has come out. I've been seeing a lot of people having these really bad takes on Dune. Really just awful takes. Some takes are in good faith. Some are not. And I'm going to go over a couple of the big ones what did you guys? Where did you buy it? Oh, Amazon. Just bought it on Amazon. That's all. I looked up nice noisy keyboards. That's how I found it. Watch this at 11 a.m. I'm actually showing on Saturday at Spice is Real. Oh yeah, 11 a.m. Yeah, people are going early for this movie. I'm telling you. But so a few of the takes I've seen, they predominantly fall into a few categories. Now, to give you a heads up of how this stream's going to go, we're going to go over a couple of tweets I've seen, and then we're going to go over a couple of videos that I have selected I think are going to be really over-the-top reactions that I can do my usual reaction thing to. I'll stop it, commentate on it, and move on. They're not super long videos, so we might get through a couple if we play it smart, but I digress. Kind of wild how rushed, fast-paced Part 2 seemed despite all the stuff. Yeah, that's the thing. It's very fast-paced for a 2 hour and 45-minute movie. I feel like Dune Part 2 is a perfect movie as a standalone film and a great movie as an adaptation, depending how you ask. Yeah, I think Dune Part 1 and 2, they're both amazing films as science fiction cinema. As adaptations of the book, they are excellent, but they are still a few things they don't adapt. And a few things they changed that I think worked really well. I guess I should talk about my thoughts on those changes before we move on to the bad takes, because I feel like a lot of these bad takes, they will be connected to these general thoughts. And let's start with the lack of Aaliyah in the film. Aaliyah Jessica is pregnant in Dune Part 2, in the later half, in the whole book of Dune, really. And by the end of it, she gives birth to Aaliyah, who is Paul's sister, who was pre-born. Because Lady Jessica drinks the water of life and becomes the Reverend Mother of the Fremen. While she's pregnant with Aaliyah, Aaliyah is basically given consciousness while in the womb. She's bombarded with generations of memories, and that twists her mind and opens her up ultimately to, shall we say, some very dark influences, if you've read Children of Dune. I don't want to spoil that, but let's just say somehow Palpatine returns decades before Rise of Skywalker, only this time it's, well, if you've read Children of Dune, you know what I'm referring to. I think it's good, though, that Aaliyah wasn't born yet, even though we see her future self in the form of... I won't spoil the casting for that. It's Anya Taylor-Joy. I spoiled it for you. I'm sorry. But I think it's interesting because it allows us to build up to Aaliyah, and frankly, in the book, Aaliyah is killed, but Aaliyah kills the Baron Harkonnen. It's kind of silly that a 2-year-old, kills the big bad, but again, that's how it is in the book. The other big change is Zendaya's rendition of Chani. Chani becomes... In the book, Chani is fiercely loyal to Muad'Dib, to Paul, to the point where she is right there with him the whole time, and she gets the political marriage that he has to have with the Princess Irulan as a necessity of the job. Yes, she's dismayed by it, but she still understands why she has to do it. In the film, that is not the case. Chani, halfway through the movie, just realizes where this story is going, and she is not along for the ride at that point. And I think that's really something. I think it really demonstrates how a change in adaptation can really go a long way. I think Chani's excellent in this movie. All right, so I guess I've delayed long enough. Let's talk about these bad takes, shall we? Now, the bad takes of Dune Part 2. They kind of fall into a few categories. The first category is takes where essentially takes where they have an issue with how do I even start with this? So I'm just going to show you one of these bad takes. Let's bring them up. Let's start bringing these over. So right here's one type of bad take. This bad take is very simple. It kind of implies that Denis Villeneuve, I cannot say his last name, very sorry. Denis Villeneuve. He argues that he came up with all this great stuff about the book. He really elevated the material, and Frank Herbert was just snorting cocaine and not thinking about anything. And he was kind of like high out of his mind. Which I think is really, really misleading for a number of reasons. First of all, yes, amazing director, gets the text, tries to elevate it with his direction. Of course. Frank Herbert, though, was a genius in his own right. He looked at history from the long form of history. He looked at the way people honor their messiahs, how religion can control and dominate, how subjugation can result in colonization, can result in all this negativity. It's, again, this is a curtains, again, someone's saying in the comments, the curtains is always blue. It's that kind of argument, yeah, where people will try to minimize the accomplishments of an author, of their work, by arguing that it's not real, there's not really complexity. You're just reading too much into it. You're just looking at it wrong. You're looking for something to discuss. When Frank Herbert was not subtle about his themes at all. He's very overt. They have frank, long discussions about all the themes of their story throughout the whole books. Frank Herbert, and this is kind of a far-off spoiler, he basically ends his line of the books with him entering into the story with his own insert, with his wife's insert, discussing how, you know, the story has become so complex, it's actually come out of their control. And it's kind of poetic in some ways that he passed away shortly after writing that into Chapterhouse Dune. But Frank Herbert was all equally brilliant, just in a different way. Yes, he was a very complex man in other respects. I think his political beliefs are, I would say, self-contradictory is a good word for it. But the themes he's talking about are not new. These are not new things to the film. I think Herbert's skepticism came from the weirdness of the later books, God Emperor and Chapterhouse and such. Yeah, God Emperor of Dune is bizarre. Chapterhouse Dune is bizarre. Honestly, so is Heretics of Dune. Heretics or Hunters? The fifth book between... I always get the names sometimes mixed up of Heretics with Hunters of Dune. Anyway, those last three books get really weird. Children of Dune is really strange. It's a little out there, but again, the works of Frank Herbert stand the test of time for a very good reason. He was a fantastic writer and a fantastic visionary for what would become one of the greatest works of science fiction of all time. So that's one take, that Frank Herbert didn't really think of anything. There's a couple I've seen a lot of takes where they're comparing Dune to Life of Brian, which I love. I love that. Some of the reactions are fantastic. It is Heretics of Dune? Okay, it's Heretics of Dune. Thank you. I always get that. Anyway. And then you get stuff like this, where it's like, you know, Alejandro Jodorowsky, with his version of Dune, was like... I mean... But with love. He's doing it with love. Which is... Every director has their take on Dune. It's crazy. Wild. Anyway, another take I've been seeing a lot of, and this is a little more common. Okay, I'm just going to highlight the Matt Ramos post here. Soups, as they call him. Another big... And I actually made this tweet initially, but I'm using a screenshot I grabbed. I don't think I grabbed this. I think I copied it from someone else. But point's the same. A tweet that I found from Soups, the real Soups, Matt Ramos, where he says, I'm just going to read this out loud, that last hour of Dune Part 2 was unreal. Not only was Paul rising to become who he was meant to be, but it felt like Timmy was also rising to become who he was meant to be. One of the best actors of the next generation. Now, let's talk a second here. Timothée Chalamet, his performance as Paul is fantastic. It is utterly entrancing. He is terrific in this role. Undeniably so. He is great. That being said, it's a little strange saying that Paul rising to become who he was meant to be in this case, because Paul isn't meant to be this. He chooses to be this. He chooses to embrace the role of the Kwisatz Haderach, of Muad'Dib. He chooses to make his name become a killing word, as they so eloquently say. It's one of the great scenes of the movie, yes, but it is a horrifying scene. It is meant to disturb, not so much entrance. This is not a scene meant to make you think, oh, he's the hero. It's meant to show you that he is essentially becoming a false messiah. He is becoming an antichrist figure. He is becoming a deceiver just as much as a leader. Yes, it is awe-inspiring, but it's oversimplified to call this a hero. I mean, he doesn't say the word heroic, but the way he phrases the context, it's clear he wants to treat this like he would, say, treat the scene in Spider-Man Far From Home, No Way Home, when all the Spider-Men show up and be cool and fight the bad guys and punch them out. This isn't that. This is a horrifying, tragic scene. This is King Lear, announcing he's going to give up his kingdom. This is Othello choking out Desdemona. This is a scene of horror. This is the beginning of Paul's downfall, not his rise. Yes, it's his rise to power, but his downfall of his morality, of his humanity. It is the beginning of a destructive jihad, a holy war that destroys planets, destroys billions. This is the beginning. This is like in Star Wars Episode 3 when Vader turns the dark side. This is that kind of thing. It's not meant to be good. It's meant to be horrifying. And the way Supes kind of phrases it and contextualizes it, it sounds as though he's saying that this is the good scene. This is the best scene in the movie. It's a challenging scene. You know who's really great in that scene? Zendaya. Chani's reaction to that is the scene of seeing someone you love become a dictator. Zendaya sells the look of someone realizing that the person that they loved is now becoming a cult leader, essentially. Dune Part 2 works so well for me because it serves as a cautionary tale of unchecked religious fanaticism. Yeah. And that's the power of Dune as a work of fiction as well. Dune is not about heroes, and that's something that people with the book, when they read the book back in the 60s, also fell for. So, the Supes' bad take is not unique to Supes. This is a bad take that dates back all the way to the 60s. That's why even the previous versions of Dune, they played down the element of Paul being this dangerous figure. They play up the heroic side, at least for the... I know the sci-fi miniseries adapts Dune Messiah and Children of Dune too, but the first story, it is the story of Paul rising up, forming an army, and stopping bad guys, essentially. The Harkonnens are bad guys. But you have to be kind of a little bit... You have to be not paying attention to notice that there's more at play here than just simply Paul stopping the Harkonnens. There's a lot of tragedy at play here. Because he's about to become worse than the Harkonnens ever dreamed of being. She and I saw that scene was like, Denis fully gets what Dune is about, the dangers of Messiah complex and all that. Yeah, that scene where you know... Listen, for all my complaints of the minutia not being adapted, he hits it out of the park where it matters, and this is where it matters. Yeah. And Dune in my comp fine. I'm not sure which context is that. I don't watch or read fine, but... Oh, I see. I see a comment. Yeah. Is the worm a threat or like a major antagonist? The worm is not a threat. Let me rephrase that. The worm is like a factor of nature. The worm is just, it's an animal. It exists. It's not a bad guy. It's not a villain. It's just a worm. It's an animal, like anything else. It's a part of nature. In fact, without the worms, there'd be no spice. So, there you go. But takes like this, again, these are not unusual. These takes were going back in the 60s when Dune was first published. It's because of the takes like this that when Dune Messiah first came out, Frank Herbert got a lot of heat from it. The closest I compare it to is The Last Jedi, essentially. That Dune Messiah was like The Last Jedi of the 70s, in that it was a sequel that completely countered the fun people had with the earlier entry and forced you to reevaluate everything in context. But I think like how The Last Jedi will be viewed, Dune Messiah has since been reevaluated as a major part of the story. And with Denis Villeneuve incorporating elements of Dune Messiah already into the first Dune Part 2, I see it getting really well, especially with how they implement Chani's skepticism as well as the Princess Irulan's beginning manipulations of the throne. I wouldn't say the sandworm's an antagonist either. Sandworm's just a sandworm. It's just there. It's that it can be. They ride it. They steer it. In fact, it's essential to resolving the conflict at the end. Yeah, no wonder I loved The Last Jedi. No wonder I loved Dune Messiah so much. It was because it was The Last Jedi. It is The Last Jedi of Dune. Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment. Now, obviously though, and of course, there's another alternate take on this, a different variation that Paul is a white savior. here to save the Fremen from the evils of the Harkonnens. And this is a take that I think that has a lack of nuance as well. It's a variation of this, where we believe that Dune showcases Paul as a good moral person, as the hero, when in fact he is not. For Paul to be a white savior, he'd have to be saving them from something, but he's not. Paul's actions are not that of a hero, but of a colonizer who uses the religion that was instilled in that area by the Bene Gesserit to further control the people of Arrakis. And it's very heartbreaking because, especially with the case of Stilgar, we see this hope in their eyes, this joy, this excitement, and then you realize that the reality is all that they're doing is being controlled by a very different leader. It's trading out one master for another, in a sense. One colonizing, dominating force for another, except this one comes with the terrible purpose of colonizing other worlds as well. It leads the people of Arrakis down into horror. And in fact, I'm just rereading Dune Messiah again after seeing Dune Part 2, and I had forgotten that they even had mentioned that some of the Fremen didn't like Paul. I forget, after you read a book a while back and you some of the details fade into memory, you know, even the Fremen were skeptical of Paul in that book. So it's not new that with this movie we have Fremen who are skeptical of Paul. You know, it's from the books, not told in the same way the books tell it, but it's still there. Where we see this fanaticism and they kind of stop and go, wait, why are we fighting? Why are we doing all this? There's no point to this violence, except for the fact that it's dictated by religious fanaticism. The only real difference is that in the books, Paul's more passive about his domination, whereas in the film, Paul is more deliberate. He chooses to attack. He chooses to invade other planets. It's not just his horde of followers going out and conquering it. He's the one dictating it. And it's horrifying. Anyway, so those are two different variants of the same criticism. But I want to point out something important about these theories so far. So far, these bad takes are derived from misinterpretation of the text. They are looking at Dune from the perspective of someone who enjoys it, who earnestly just doesn't get it. Maybe by choice, maybe by accident, but these are bad takes born from people who just don't get what Dune's about. And you know what? That's okay. Dune's very complex. It's not an easy text to read or interpret, but they are bad takes, and these are the ones I really want to focus on, that are less because they're misinterpreting the text or something like that. It's because they're actively being misogynistic, actively being racist. And that brings me to this. Okay. Let's talk about this. We have here Baron. Oh, is that someone who apparently loves Kyle Rittenhouse, apparently. Sean Young in the original 1984 Dune as Chani was beautiful, elegant, aristocratic, unforgettable. Zendaya in the Dune remake, in the same role, looks like she just crossed America's southern borders. They do this to humiliate you. Okay. First off, you haven't really seen Dune 1984 if you're saying anything positive about Sean Young's portrayal of Chani compared to Zendaya's performance of Chani. Because Sean Young barely says anything in that movie. It's not a good interpretation of Chani. I love the David Lynch movie, but the entire second half of the book is done very poorly in that film. He gets the first half, he gets a version of it, and then he rushes the second half because they had to rush a version of the movie out in 2 hours. Secondly, you're saying that Zendaya is not attractive? That she's not beautiful? She's not elegant? She's not unforgettable? Really? Zendaya? Already I have to judge your tastes, but I think it's also because you're saying that because you're being racist, I'm pretty sure. I believe it's a racism thing you're doing right there. But let's stop a second here. The Fremen are supposed to be Middle Eastern or North African. These are people... The Fremen come from a planet called Arrakis, which sounds an awful lot like Iraq, where a precious mineral is mined. Maybe oil. Maybe the diamonds that the colonists took from those lands. But, let's be fair. It's obvious that this is racially motivated. Do I have to explain that? It's pretty clear. That you're saying that a woman of color is not beautiful, not elegant, not aristocratic, not unforgettable, and you're saying that she's crossing from the southern border and this is done to humiliate people? Why? This person does not understand Dune, either deliberately or accidentally, because they are... Yeah, Sean Young had 1 or 2 lines. Yeah, maybe 2 lines. 3 if you're watching the 3-hour cut. She's barely in the movie. And it's not even the best role that Sean Young has had in science fiction. I think that would go to probably Blade Runner. But, it's hard to even assess this as valid criticism because it's just racism. It's just overt, unshackled bigotry. And everyone reacted to it because... as accordingly. Now, again, one thing also, calling Chani aristocratic is kind of runs counter to the book because, again, as this commenter points out, in the books and the films, Paul can't marry Chani because she's not royalty. He has to marry Irulan to maintain power of some variety. There's a 3-hour cut of Dune 84. Yes, I've seen it. It is the version that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel when I was a kid. That's actually how I first saw Dune, the movie. I saw the 3-hour version. Anyway. Yeah, Fremen are more akin to Arabs or Muslims. That's or North Africans, I think. I think any of those are acceptable. But with that in mind, I compiled a list of potentially bad takes of Dune. A few of these, I think, are... I just typed in Dune Part 2 Woke, and I saw it came up. And what I'm going to do is most of these, I'm going to go for the ones that are like 10 minutes. We're going to go through a couple of them, and we're going to watch what these people are saying to see what they say. I can already see Shadiversity right there, and I'm excited to see what he has to say because I can't wait to rip into it. Mr. Peach wears pants in the Mario movie, and that's bad himself. I cannot wait. If I had a nickel for every time Sean Young was a part of an 80s movie that got either remade or sequelified by Denis Villeneuve, I'd have 2 nickels. Yeah, it is funny how she was in Dune, Blade Runner 2049, though. That was kind of funny. So this video was made, that Chad did, was done 3 weeks prior to Dune coming out. I want to see what he says, and I want to see if what he's saying is exactly what people are saying right now. Because I've seen a few dozen of these bad takes. I'm not going to go through every single one of them where they mock the changes made to Chinese character and use it as a way to argue the film's woke or something, which is bizarre when you're talking about Dune, but I digress. So let's start with the Night's Watch video here that Chad did, 10 minutes long. Guys, pray for my algorithm. Pray for my YouTube algorithm. I'm going to have to just binge watch AGramuglia after this to rebalance it after what I'm about to do to it. The irreparable harm this is doing to it. I hate this already. I hate it already.
Welcome back to The Watch, and today we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about Dune Part 2. Now, I want to be clear here. These aren't... Okay, all right. Let's
gather around, children.
Gather around. All right,
this
so
is serious.
These are not signs that it's going to be terrible, but they're not positive signs either. And we kind of have 2 conflicting things.
Tyrod's been overly optimistic because he doesn't want this to suck.
It's
because everything...
Ironic considering this movie's so amazing, but I digress. What I do is download the video so I don't give these people ad revenue. That's too bad for me, unfortunately. Listen, if I'm going to capitalize on these videos based on watching them, I guess I could repay them in that small way for the content, but I digress.
only thing that I have been excited for like 8 months.
You're peeking the microphone. That never happens.
This is important. This is like
Everything has been so bad lately, man. I need something.
we want Dune to be good.
I really want it to be good. Now, the director has come out and said some things that I kind of understand, but at the same time feel unnecessary. And then we've also had another director, a well-regarded director, come out and say that he's been shown a preview and it's really good. Okay, so we've kind of got two things going on here. We'll start with the bad stuff first.
Okay.
So if you want to, we've got this little article here. These are the words of the director and what's her name?
Zendaya.
Yes. Basically, they're trying to say that the director wasn't happy with Chani, Zendaya's character, and Lady Jessica's role in the second act of the book, right? Yeah. So he wanted to make them more pronounced and give them more screen time.
Did he say why he was unhappy with?
Let's check that article, shall we? I'm going to check that out. I want to see what they're talking about. So let's take a look. Denis Villeneuve, Lady Jessica, Chani. Let's find it. Let's find the exact. Of course, all of these are much. I'm trying to find a quick. So don't bore you guys too much. Okay, so here we go. This might be what they're talking about. So we got an article from Total Films right here. I'm just going to skim through it real quick. So Zendaya teases her role in Dune, but it's not the biggest change between the movie and the novel. Speaking to Total Films, this might be what they're talking about. Zendaya notes that what Denis does very well is take the female characters more deeply into consideration in a way that was rarely the case for science fiction in the 60s. Okay, that's a fair point. Listen, this is the age where Isaac Asimov didn't have any women in his books and where Arthur C. Clarke had a whole paragraph about why women can't be in space because of zero gravity's effects on boobs. So, yeah, Zendaya is accurate. If you're very old science fiction, that to be the case. Director Denis Villeneuve claims that as the movie progresses, there's a shift in the main character, and Chani becomes my reference to point of view, which we see very effectively. Yeah, that's what happens. It's great. Chani's role as the protagonist really helps put into perspective Paul's descent into darkness. Wasn't entirely so. He was able to build out a strong sense of Chani's own views and life. It wasn't entirely like she's at the will of who she's in love with. I did feel a particular sense of care for what Chani represents in his films. Yeah, that's fair. He wrote Chani to be a very independent character, which is great. Strangely, Jessica's more in the background in the second part of the novel. I thought that it was not proper, Denis asserts. She's still Lady Jessica, the main architect of the story. I thought that was a very powerful idea that was not sustained in the book. I made sure that she has a character presence in the second part. And again, that works. I think she did a great job, really, being put front and center as this kind of manipulative figure. I am a little bummed that the relationship between Lady Jessica and Chani is purely antagonistic. I do like how in the book, Lady Jessica is supportive of Chani and genuinely seems to care about her. But, that's the sacrifice of telling the story that they're telling. And again, why would someone being colonized love their colonizer? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's. I'm assuming that's the interview. This total films interview. So let's keep going with what Shad is saying about Chani and Lady Jessica.
He felt as though they were
not Shad, but his
first off, Lady Jessica was important in the first half, but then she kind of gets pushed to the back, which makes sense because Paul steps forward and there's that sort of stuff, right? Chani is an interesting one because obviously in the first half she's not really there that much.
Yes, just in visions, maybe.
Yes, and then in the second act they actually meet, they start their relationship, all that sort of stuff. So we've got a couple of lines here if you wanted to read some of them out.
Okay, so the first Dune movie was all about Paul, but it seems, and yes, that makes sense, that'll be all about him. But it seems like that's all about to change in the upcoming sequel with Zendaya Freeman character Chani coming into her own. Chani's limited role in Part 1 will be greatly expanded in Part 2, even beyond the scope of the novel, with director Denis...
I don't know how to say it either.
Villeneuve.
Make an attempt. I had to try. I didn't know how either. You have to try
Villain.
at least.
Let's just call him Dennis Villain.
Villeneuve, claiming that as the movie progresses, there's a shift in the main character, and Chani becomes my reference as a point of view. That is concerning, isn't it?
Yes.
Why?
It's in order to show Paul through the eyes of the people he's colonizing. That's why. And again, you couldn't tell this from, at this time, from 3 weeks ago. I know the film hasn't come out yet. Okay. Oh, and I see you have a set follow-up video where you review Dune Part 2. I'll get to that, Shad, in a second. But yeah, no, I think they're gonna say that Paul's supposed to be the main character and the hero. Again, saying Paul steps up to the plate, essentially, as they're saying, indicates that they think that Paul needs to be the central perspective of the view. Paul's the center of the universe in Dune. He is the fulcrum upon which everything bends. That much is true, but that's not necessarily a good thing. And sometimes it helps to have an outward perspective to see how everything is. He's white. It's the only 50 hero. Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah. Denis is Denny. I would pronounce Denis as Denny. Denis. Yeah, that might be accurate. Anyway.
Like if they mean, the first movie establishes Paul as the guy.
Okay, let's just get through this next one and then...
Speaking to Total Film in the blah blah blah, which features Dune 2 on the cover and is out this Thursday, Zendaya notes that what Dennis does very well is take the female character more deeply into consideration in a way that was rarely the case for science fiction in the 60s. So?
This feels like a very elegant way to put for a modern audience.
I know. I'm offended that the book didn't focus, Pride and Prejudice didn't focus on Mr. Darcy as the primary character.
Mr. Darcy's the secondary lead in the book of Pride and Prejudice. He's the pride. he's the prejudice. Or was he the pride? No, he's the pride and Darcy's the pride and Elizabeth is the prejudice, because of her prejudice towards, or is it the other? Well, maybe it's kind of both, actually. They're both kind of prideful and prejudiced. Anyway, who cares? Point is that they're misconstruing this whole argument. Yeah, science fiction did not have a lot of women in the 60s. I'm sorry to say. I don't mean to offend anyone, but hot take, women weren't that prominent in 60s books. So if you're going to adapt a text, you gotta add some, and he did that already in the first Dune movie. With the planetologist, Kynes. That's a guy in the book, and they made it into a woman in the first Dune movie, and no one cared at all. No one made a big deal about it. But again, let's see what else you have to say. I want to hear him complain.
Maybe certain genres focus on certain characters because they fill the role and they have archetypical things. Want the hero? It's an action science fiction, for crying out loud.
So in the Dune novel, women and men fight. Lady Jessica beats Stilgar in a fight. That's in the book too, if I remember correctly. So acting like the issue is because certain roles were needed when Dune does, to Frank Herbert's credit, I think he does try to make sure all of his female characters do play a very strong role. And again, Chani comes from a warrior society where everyone has to fight to survive. There are no passive women in among the Fremen. It's weird that this is the argument he goes for, though, because Dune was never about sex. There is sexism in Dune, obviously, it's built into the world structure, but considering one of the most powerful organizations is a matriarchal society, I mean, we're not even getting into the face dancing Talaxu who are by definition all gender fluid. I cannot imagine what he'd say if he even knew about the face changers who all change their gender and canonically in the books have no defined gender. But, what are you going to do?
That is a concern.
This is
now you want to see Rebecca Ferguson kick Javier Bardem's ass? That's in the first film, actually. In the end of the first film, she beats Javier Bardem.
Concerning. Now, we can read more if you want, or we can kind of overview it. It's up to you. Basically, they're just saying Lady Jessica's also the same. She was kind of the architect, you could say, of everything in the first act, and then the second act, she's not so much. So they want to bring her back so she has more of a role, which I think kind of makes sense. But at the same time, it's Paul stepping up, and
The reason why this is a red flag, because I'm not saying it couldn't work and they couldn't make a good movie.
Yes.
The red flag is that when people start to prioritize representation, right, over the source material, that's them basically saying that they think they can do better than the source material. The source material is a success for a reason. And so it takes a level of hubris and arrogance to think you could do better and to call out certain things problematic, right? Oh, not enough representation. And it's also a red flag because it exposes that they might be prioritizing something more than quality.
So this is an interesting thing. So looking back at that quote, let me show. I'm going to show you something about that quote real quick. Actually, not going to show it to you. I'm just going to tell you it. They never actually said anything about representation. This is all him just spitballing it. He's just coming to conclusions. The quote was that the role wasn't as expansive, and they expanded it. They put it as a viewpoint character. And as we see in the film, the execution of that is that Zendaya's perspective is... Not Zendaya. Chani's perspective is looking at Paul as someone who comes to her society and has this terrible purpose, this influence, this fanatical impact on the people who live among the Fremen. And that's the thing also, if we're talking about Dune, though, if you have arrogance about changing the text, every version of Dune has changed the text. Every adaptation of Dune has drastically altered the text in some variety. These versions change it the least, but in the David Lynch version, they added a ton of bizarre things, like most of the film, for example, is really bizarre. Everything with the Harkonnens is just baffling. For one, the ending of David Lynch's film is completely a horror story if you know how sandworms exist. And then there's the sci-fi miniseries that, ironically enough, Hallmark did, where instead of giving Chani a bigger role, they give the Princess Irulan a massive role in the first Dune book. She becomes a secondary protagonist there in a way that is very unusual. In fact, she's assisting Paul in a lot of the first miniseries for Dune, in some capacity. She becomes like a protagonist, truly, which makes her actions in the second half all the more tragic because it's more of a tragic fall from grace. So Shad here complaining that Dune Part 2 makes changes for the sake of... That indicates some arrogance on the director's part. Well, what about the other movies? Do you have the same issue there? Or is it just when a woman of color happens to get a bigger role? Oh yeah, the cat milking anecdote. So the cat milking scene in Dune, the David Lynch Dune, it's completely made up for the film, where they give Thufir a poison, and they're like, Thufir, if you want to survive... And he's poisoned in the book, if I remember correctly, too, but in order to stave off the poison, he has to milk this cat. And if he drinks the milk once a day, he'll live, and if not, he'll perish. And what's so strange is that Thufir plays such a minimal role in the theatrical cut after that point that you're kind of like, well, what was the point of this? Like in the 3-hour cut, there's a little more he does, but like in the 2-hour cut, it's like you watch this. This is a strange amount of time spent talking about milking a cat for a character who doesn't show up after this point in the movie, essentially. Anyway,
presentation over quality, and then if they don't have the talent to write as well as the source material, invariably the new stuff that they make isn't going to be as good.
I'm interested because all of the trailers and even the first film, people who haven't watched any of the original Dune films or read any of the books think that this is going to be a love story between Chani and Paul, where the truth of this, spoiler alert, I'll give you, if you don't know, spoiler alert, he ends up...
That's too much of a spoiler.
Okay, all right. A different... How to put it this way then. Chani is a... Is that a spoiler?
Yes, it is!
Well, it's the truth! People are looking at it like it's a...
What? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what? Okay. Chani is taken as Paul's concubine at the end of the book Dune. But it is directly stated that essentially she's really his wife. That Chani is Paul's true wife. and that Irulan is a marriage out of political necessity. And the films indicate that too. They don't show Chani being taken as the concubine, but it is shown that Paul marrying Irulan is a political move. It's purely politics. The way you're phrasing this, you're making it sound. And I was almost going to say this guy sounds halfway reasonable until he said that. I was actually kind of going, oh, good, someone who actually understands the book at least a little bit. But nope, that took me right out of it. It reminded me not to have any hope in this world or in this video. What you're saying is you think that Chani is a So Chani, the way you're phrasing it, you're acting like that is not part of the love story between Chani and Paul. And Chani and Paul's story is a romance. It's a very sad romance, though. Even in the books, there's at least an understanding from Chani that she is out of her league with Paul in terms of the political maneuverings that surround Irulan, especially in Dune Messiah. She has a purer love for Paul, but that pure love is manipulated and corrupted thanks to the intrigue in court, thanks to Irulan's machinations. By saying that you think that by downgrading Chani's entire role to being like a concubine, I don't know, that strikes me as very missing the point of what the themes of the book are, especially considering that the last paragraph of the book is outlining why Chani is actually winning the story while Irulan is losing the romantic story. I digress. Anyway,
love story. It's like
actually, you know what? Where's the last line of Dune? Let me get the last line of Dune book here. Okay, here we go. The closing line. Let me see if I can get an image of this so I can get a little. Oh, of course, I can't find the actual quote here. I mean, the book is behind me, but that would require moving, and I don't feel like doing that. And, like, I don't know. Anyway, the last line of the book is all about... it's essentially about how Lady Jessica is talking to Chani and giving you these encouraging words about how really she is the true wife of Paul, despite everything. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the reason why you're watching this.
that's not really what this is.
No, I think it's important to know from the book, though, because if we go into the movie, I don't think they're going to do it.
They have to.
I don't think they're going to do it.
You know what they would do? If they want to do that, it's going to be because she's going to be empowered and she'll sleep with whoever she wants, and she's not going to be tied down in a commitment with a man.
Zendaya's done that once before already.
She has, hasn't she? And that's modern day bullcrap that we don't friggin' want.
Did you miss the point of the ending of Dune? Do all three of you not understand how Dune's ending works? Like, oh my goodness. Of course, they did change the ending, but not in the way they realized.
Polyamory, let's get into it, you degenerates.
So
now Shad's anti-polyamory, apparently.
They are flags of a certain color so far.
Beige flags.
Yeah. But on the flip side of this...
Let me not spoil it. She's going to hit massive spoiler.
I gave you warning. All right. Dune 2 has got an ideal early review from Christopher Nolan.
And now they're going to go into positive stuff here. I want to cut to see where his bad takes are after he's seen the film. So we're going to cut ahead to these people watching the film. Skipping the bad opening.
It was bloody brilliant. I loved it.
So you like the film?
Of the Dune lore,
nothing.
Great. That's exactly what I thought would happen.
Okay,
all right.
You got a spicy take, you.
No, I don't. No. I really don't.
Okay.
I just want to get in. I don't want to get into spoilers yet either. I just want to say that I think that this film was fantastic with one caveat, and I think people who don't know anything about the lore will love it. It was a brilliant film. Mm-hmm. Art direction, visual effects, sound design, everything about this film is immaculate, and they almost hit all of the story notes, like all the most important ones, which is really good. But there's a caveat in there.
Oh, we'll get to it. Let's share some general thoughts.
Well, I'm the exact same. Like as someone who hasn't read the books
yet. Okay, so they like it. But let me see
Dune Part 2
that's a good review. Never mind. No. I have it twice in my...
taken to another world, and I was on board
I'm not watching the whole.
I
40
will
minutes of
admit,
this.
for
I just wanna
me,
get
it
the-
was just
the
a
bad take.
little bit too long near the crossover to the end. I thought they were going to do like a
chapter break here?
thing because it was like
I'm
building up a
glad
lot.
they didn't.
Glad they didn't,
they
but at the
need
same
chapter
time,
breaks.
physically, I was yawning a bit because I was like, okay, we're going on for like it's
See-
one of those movies you got to strap in for.
The Baron, the music is so loud, I don't know what he said because he like whispers it, and I literally have no idea what he said there. But apart from that, that might
think-
just been a cinema thing.
I think I might know what he said because, if we get to the scene, maybe into the spoilers section of the
Come on,
review.
just get to the point.
But
Where's
like,
the bad
holy crap, right? The visuals were amazing.
thing? Okay.
We'll get there. Okay, so I got so much enjoyment out of this, right? My
liked it,
enjoyment
I
score was
guess.
Like a 10
Where's
out
the
of
bad
10,
take?
but
I
That
want
is
you-
weighed against the fact that we've had such crap films that
Yes,
have never.
this is
that's
a
drawn
good
you.
film,
Like,
yeah.
it's a really.
Also, I know I just made a movie, a video comparing Star Wars to Dune, but I do think it is a bit. And this might be hypocritical of me to say, but I think the take's also saying that Dune is a Star Wars killer is a little preemptive here because Star Wars is its own thing. I mean, I had a video comparing Dune to Star Wars, so it might be a little hypocritical of me, but I think saying Dune's a Star Wars killer is a little missing the point. Anyway,
Really good film, and then it's the water in the drought kind of effect where I'm just so grateful,
Do you get?
as in how much time.
Yeah, how much time passed?
Well, I mean, it has to have been, 9 months or a bit under 9 months because of the baby.
Yeah. There's like a large swath of time passes, but it feels much quicker.
Actually, well,
And
to
then-
me, because the baby was like a continual kind of check of where the progression of time is going, I was not feel. I felt natural to me.
Babies with spice are different. It's a law thing. There's a whole thing there.
it's the bad take. Come on.
It was just felt like they were trying to get through a lot of story beats, like introducing Fade so late in the game kind of thing. Then we had
Is that the bad guy?
the younger one.
Yeah,
The young one, because I thought his introduction was great more than Dune Part 1.
Yeah.
What about-
The law, how it is. I bet you your opinion's gonna go. I shouldn't have said all those things.
maybe not. Like, I think it's good to judge it on its own kind of thing.
Really?
Yeah, we do that with even Avatar, but then we do compare
Yeah, he does.
what they
Then
could have
tell
done
him what
better.
happens, and then he goes,
All
the
right,
original's better.
So, those are our ratings. Brilliant film. Like, if you want just, like, one of those films that
All right,
come
so
across
let's
very
hear what the
rarely,
exception is. That's all I want to really hear about.
go on,
right
watch
now.
this. This is a
I want to hear your
great
bad
film.
take because I just want to
very good
react
film.
to it.
With
I like
combined
Dune.
with
You have to
part 1 and
preach
2 when
the
you can watch
choir
them
for me on
back
this
to
one.
back. They are very good. They're a very good representation. Like, I really enjoy them. Are we getting into
We
spoilers?
will. I think one last thing to mention is that the budget on this film is 190 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just find it such an interesting contrast when you compare it to other 200 million budgets. Wasn't the Marvels like it that or something?
Some of the Marvel stuff.
So that's actually an interesting point, and I will bring that up. So one interesting discussion about Dune Part 2 and Part 1 is the budget. They are much cheaper than the Marvel films that have been coming out lately. And I think one reason why they look so good is because they actually shoot in real locations. And because they use the graininess of the sand and the lighting and sandstorms to cover up the faults in CG. When you're in hard light, you can see all the imperfections of an object. You have to have the light blend off a certain way. It can come across as too shiny. It highlights the unreality of it. With Jurassic Park, for example, all the lighting is so dim and the rain is so intense, and there's a lot of visual noise that keeps you from really appreciating the imperfections of the CG dinosaurs. That's why Jurassic Park looks better than Jurassic World, despite decades passing, because they had the sense to cover up and conceal and account for the faults of the CG. And Dune does that too. So they're able to make really incredible looking effects that conceal the shortcomings. That's a cool little technique there. But anyway, that's what they say is bad.
Indiana
Because
Jones.
they
And
clickbait
again,
me now.
compare and contrast. Like a quality of this film, just even visually, let alone everything else. That, wow, they are doing some really good visual storytelling here. That, I mean, it technically has a smaller budget than some of these other films.
Okay, I get the point.
But in terms of what you're saying, I think they could still do it.
How? That's the portrayal of Chani in this film.
You think that
is not the portrayal of Chani at all?
Because you think she left him at the end. I'm done with you, basically.
Well, she left him, and not only that, she was trying to. She didn't believe in him the whole thing. That's not. That
Oh,
was.
really?
This is
So-
all. Yeah, that's all inserted. That's
Okay,
not,
okay. So she was on board with the prophecy in the book.
Yeah.
Was she? Interesting.
she loved him, and they have, children or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's a massive departure, and that's why the end of this story, I was surprised that they showed the jihad, because I didn't think they would show that.
The jihad,
with all the Fremen leaving to basically conquer the galaxy. That is in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that departure, the whole Chani storyline and stuff is kind of weird. It's not.
I knew they were going to come to Chani.
I mean, like, if you're comparing it to the books, I guess, but for me, just going in flat, I actually felt that they paced it out well enough. And so my wife tried to read the book, right? And she got checked out because she told me that, and again, we're in the spoiler section now, and we're talking about this current book, right? There's a big time leap when after the time leap, suddenly they're basically married. Well, not married, but they're together, basically. It seems like the movie showed more of that progression than the books. It felt more natural. And even though they don't dwell heaps of time on it, they just... Every new scene, they're a bit closer, and there are some interactions that justify it. And then, they're lying next to each other, and they're close, kind of thing. And the story isn't really focused on that. And I thought it was done all right.
There's no problem with that. The problem is the ending of it.
The ending of it.
With her leaving. That's the problem with that.
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on how they execute the next film then.
The next film isn't on this.
I know, but for the story as is, I think it works. But if there's concerns how they'll adapt it, I can see where you're coming from. And... I don't know. I think they've shown enough talent to be able to pull it off.
That's the part... Okay, so now I'm kind of surprised that Shad here is the voice of reason on this. Oh, God. Where are we in this world where he has a reasonable point? I digress. So, yes, this is this interesting point of discussion. Does Chani leaving Paul at the end make the book, Dune Messiah, impossible to adapt? No. Because it's clear that Chani still loves Paul. I think it's clearly relayed that she still passionately loves him, but feels betrayed by him. Paul kind of takes everything in stride at the end, kind of acting like, oh, she'll see reason, it's fine, I've foreseen it, which I think is where they're going to bring about the events of Dune Messiah. I think Chani is going to become almost like Cordelia in King Lear. That's my theory, that she's going to become like a Cordelia character, who opposes the tragic hero's fall, the actions that lead to the fall, and in trying to save the hero from himself, is ultimately destroyed by it. And yet, Shad's only right because he doesn't read the books. That's a good point. He's only right here because he didn't read the books, and he's speaking as just someone who just watched the movie for the first time. Because Shad, for better or worse, always seems to have opinions about every piece of media he's consumed that, where he'll act, intensely, and anyway. So that's not the worst take. I think the first video was much worse. But we have a couple others I want to watch too. And again, pray for my algorithm. We have one video here by someone called the Woke Critic. I've never seen this movie. It has a big sign that says "Nope" on the thumbnail, so I'm sure this is going to be a intelligent, articulate video. Let's see what he has to say.
Every generation comes along a sci-fi movie so magical, so beautiful, and so spicy that it reshapes the genre and takes cinema to a place no man, no woman, and no non-binary has gone before. In 1968, it was 2001. In 1982, Blade Runner. In 2017, The Last Jedi. Now in 2024, we have Dune Part 2, the greatest sci-fi ever. Almost. Here is the good, the bad, and the nearly of the greatest near-miss in sci-fi cinematic history. The story of Dune is simple. Star drug wars. A space spice boy is the chosen one, the Mahdi. Born to a leader who doesn't want to lead.
A great man doesn't seek to lead.
And a mother who sounds like Linda Blair.
Set us free.
Paul Atreides is
So
caught
far he's
between
trying
a
a
rock
little too hard to
and
be
a
funny.
desert place. What is his dream?
A girl on Arrakis.
And there is no man who won't withstand some sand to pound Luke's man, or a spider mom. Like the Dark One, Messiah Paul's mom is all that matters.
You inherit too much power.
What, because I'm a Duke's son?
Because you are Jessica's son.
Papa Atreides.
That's the plot of the first Dune, not Dune Part 2, but...
I should have married you.
Let this be a lesson to all men with commitment issues. The houses are at war for a barren planet, a desert rock, a spicy space meatball filled with worms. What could the House of Atreides and Harkonnen possibly want with this much sand? Drugs.
This video
This
is really
sand
bad
is no
so far.
ordinary sand. It's sand that'll get you higher than a kite on Jupiter. Not only will it turn your eyes blue and make you cuckoo, it'll fuel your spaceships from Orion to oblivion.
Skip this. I'm not enjoying
The
this at all
most
so
brutal, barbaric, and bloodlusting bastards ever seen on screen. These baked bean-headed white boys are whiter than sunlight and darker than a hotel inside a
this
black
is
hole.
bad.
Baron Harkonnen, a
He's
psychotic
really trying
Pavarotti.
really
They are
hard.
misogynist, a metaphor for man.
Yeah.
Almost every scene involves a woman losing her life to a Harkonnen knife. These villains are not just murderous, they are misogynist, a metaphor for man. Give them too much power and they'll turn women into fertilizer. No feminine flower can grow in a world that looks like snow.
What? Are you trying to make a joke about how people... I'm assuming this person's trying to be sarcastic and acting like all the people on the left are going to say the Harkonnens represent misogyny, but like... What? The Harkonnens murder everyone. Like, they're just murderous people. They kill everyone. And he's really trying so hard. Yeah, you mentioned it right there. He's trying to be Yahtzee from The Escapist. Yeah, like, here's the thing. Like, if you're funny, you're funny, and that's a skill. I'm not, for example, I'm not someone who I think comedy comes naturally to me. I'm just not someone that funny. I can be sarcastic sometimes, but you know, that's not my strength. I don't try to play up that strength. You know, I just try to be, you know, whatever. I'll say whatever I say, but like, I'm not trying to act like I'm a comedian here. This guy clearly thinks he's very funny. And again, I don't know if he's making fun of the left with these comments, or if he's trying to embody what he thinks is... Like, it's one of those things where, like, I'm not sure what the messaging is. I'm assuming he's being sarcastic, but, like... Yeah, critical drinker vibes. Yeah, that's what I'm getting too. Alright, let's see what he has to say.
On Arrakis, the Fremen are not free. They live under tyranny and attack the Harkonnen from their Dune sanctuary. Unlike the hate-filled pale white Harkonnens, they are desert people who drink their own pee and wonder if he really is the chosen one. Their society is not built on barbarism, but on beautiful feminism. As Zendaya tells Paul, "Here we are equal, men and women alike." His reply, "I'd very much like to be equal to you." A point that is hammered home at every available opportunity. The house...
Is it, though? Like... Listen, the Fremen are a free society because they're a very utilitarian, practical society. You know, they have to survive through teamwork and collective effort. They are out there. Everyone fights. There are no leaders. It's more communist than than necessarily feminist. So that's already a weird comparison to make. And like, what do you mean they hammer that point in everywhere they make? They don't really. That's not really a... Anyway. It's just weird. It's hard to argue his points because they're just strange. Like, I don't get where they're coming... Like, he's looking for things... He's looking for what he thinks the left is going to say about this film, when in reality it's like... No one's really saying that.
Houses of Atreides and Harkonnen are majestic homes of white male privilege. Caladan, don't expect more than a cameo unless you're a man. Gady Prime, bold and white.
Did we just forget about the Bene Gesserit? like, are they... Is he just ignoring the fact that the Bene Gesserit, like, exist? Like, what? Like, these aren't even, like, bad takes. I don't know where he's coming from with this. Like, this is just so bad, I'm not even sure how to respond. Like, oh, this is horrible. Okay.
White, like Walter White.
I would never compare the Baron Harkonnen to Walter White. That at least is... That's a new one. Oh my god. Okay.
The world of Arrakis is an awakening to Paul. The hierarchy is a matriarchy. The men are not masters, they are soldiers, and the women are on top. Throughout Dune Part 2, Paul falls foul of his sexist past and must change his ways. In one...
What? Like, that's... What? What? Did you even watch the movie? Like it's not even a good joke. Like, the whole movie is about him taking over, becoming a cult leader. Like, what? He's instilling his personal feelings onto the Fremen by manipulating their religion that the Bene Gesserit put in there in the first place. And I'm sure if this guy watched this reaction, he'd go, oh, don't take it so seriously, it's a joke. But, like, a joke has to be funny. A joke has to be good. The problem isn't that I find your takes offensive. I really don't. I find your lack of humor offensive. I find your inability to make me chuckle offensive.
One thoroughly shocking scene, Zendaya tries to teach Paul how to dance along the desert without waking the sand beast. Instead of listening to the woman who has lived her entire life on Arrakis, he immediately cuts her off. Now that's interesting, because in the film books I've studied, what did you just say? Paul ain't the Messiah. He's a very naughty mansplainer. The water of life.
No, it's more that he's telling them, the person who's lived on the planet for her whole life. In the books I read, they say that she's like, really? You're gonna tell me how to walk on sand when I've been doing it for my whole life? This is the dumbest freaking video I've seen in a very long time.
Birthed from the babies of sandworms, it is a magical potion that grants Arrakis women, and women only, the memories of their female ancestors. Any drinks on the menu for the boys? Sorry chaps, the bar is closed, for your memories are a blackout. Paul's mother Jessica downs her shot, and the weirding woman gets even weirder. Now she has the weirder...
Why are they playing the Harry Potter theme? What does that have to do with anything? This is pretty bad, honestly.
Ability to speak with... The Fremen believe Paul is the one to free them, but to do so he must free his mind and fulfill his prophecy. Like Arthur and Excalibur, Cinderella and a slipper, destiny calls for the Moadi, the Messiah, to drink the drink that can kill any man, but never a woman. So he does, and instantly falls into a coma. A man's mind, even a Messiah's, is far too weak to handle a woman's drink. The only thing that can save him now, no, not having his stomach pumped, but a single tear from the woman he loves rubbed onto his lips.
This is the dumbest. This is so dumb. This is so dumb. I hate this. Why did I ever decide to watch bad takes on these from these right-wingers? This is a bad decision from the start. This is actually hurting my soul. I feel like I have fallen into a hell of my own making watching this video.
A beautiful ode to Romeo and Juliet, although in this one they both live, and Juliet regrets it. What is Paul's new superpower? Can he speak to unborn babies, see 3 minutes into the future, raise an army from the dead? Not quite, for Paul has the special ability to find out who his real granddad is. Well, so who is it? A famous poet? A man who snorted more spice than Keith Richards?
I am your grandfather.
What the f-
He has the power to see all possible futures and uses it to map a chart to victory. Like, this isn't even, like, interesting. I have nothing. This is bad. I'm just gonna... You know what? I'm running the stream, so I can just stop this whenever I want. I'm gonna stop watching this video and watch something else that's bad. I mean, I'm not gonna stop streaming, but that was just bad. That was painful. I can't continue with that. It's truly one of the worst things I've seen in a very long time. Okay, so it looks like the usual suspects liked the movie and are probably going to use it to like we have the critical drinker and we have Nerdrotic. These are the typical bad take content farms that people expect to be the place where all the bad Dune takes will come from. So they're going to just attack. What they're going to do is they're going to use Dune to attack the MCU and Star Wars. We know that's what they're going to do. Like it's obvious. They're very predictable. Is that even interesting enough to discuss? Like I don't know. I'm not even sure if that's a fun one to make fun of. I feel like everyone wants me to watch these Critical Drinker. That's what you came here for. One of these extremely famous chud channels. Like, that's what you want me to do. So I guess I'll have to, but I mean, there's got to be other bad takes. Midnight's Edge. Which one's this? Do I know this one? I don't know if I know that one. Well, it looks like they're... Hang on, is that whitewashed Zendaya? Did they make Zendaya white? In the... Look at this. This is a... Like the bitter one, this is Bitter Pill. That's a white Zendaya, isn't it? They made Zendaya white in this thumbnail. Why did they do that? They made her, like, really pale looking. What about MovieBob? Okay, let's watch MovieBob's review. Okay, let's take a look at it. Did I pass by it? Let me actually, is he on here yet? You know, I'm gonna open up this as well. I'm gonna open up one of here. Open a link. Just grab in MovieBob. And let's see if he has a... I feel like his can't be that bad. I feel like MovieBob can't have too bad of a review on us. Let's take a look. Let's do MovieBob first because I need a reprieve for after. I need something to wash my brain out after what I just saw. There's no way his review can be like negative, like that bad. I may disagree with it, and just so we know, I'm not a lot of people don't like MovieBob. I'm not anti-MovieBob at all. I think some of his reviews are pretty decent. I think some are really I don't agree with. I think his opinions on the Scream franchise I completely disagree with him on, but he's what I'm more neutral on personally in terms of his opinions, and he actually follows me on Twitter, so that's kind of cool. But again, like I'm not gonna watch MovieBob for the sake of criticizing him. I'm genuinely gonna see what he thinks. Let's see what Bob thinks. Give me a fair shot. This has a chance to be the best review I see all day.
And we're back in Dune, the sci-fi blockbuster action franchise for audiences who think they're above sci-fi action blockbuster franchises, jam-packed with more knife fights and omnipresent allusions to fundamentalist Islam than your least favorite uncle's Facebook timeline. And now having dispensed with several appendices worth of who is everybody, what is everything, and what the hell exactly are we doing here's worth of exposition for the better half of part 1, they can jump just directly into all action almost all the time mode in part 2 with so much pew-pew they even went and got Florence Pugh, who's here not just to steal Zendaya's man, but also her function from the first movie as major actress of note who will just keep showing up and not really doing anything other than signal that she'll be important in the next one. Now, if you have forgotten from the last time, it has been 2 years and a question of whether or not we were going to do another movie at all in those intervening years. The gist of things are the internecine geopolitics of a space empire being fought over control of space spice, which is actually space meth, which is the only way to get space high enough to do space travel. Twist number 1 to all of this is that the space meth can only be space mined on an inhospitable space desert planet inhabited by giant space worms and an indigenous population of space metaphors for colonial space oppression who all the other space people fight over control of who gets to do space oppression of. Twist number 2 is that the real political machinations are being conducted by a centuries-old order of scheming space nuns who manipulate everyone using mind control powers and propagandize false messiahs and fake religions they largely nudge into place themselves via hands-on space eugenics. One such progeny being our protagonist, Timothy Knight Shyamalan as Paolo Atreyu, who having survived the massacre of his family alongside his mom has joined up with Zendaya as Michi and her community of indigenous Dune rebels to wage guerrilla warfare against their common enemy the Harkonnen, rulers of the kinky German expressionist planet, and also because the rebels think he's their messiah because his his mom is a space nun and she said so. And let's face it, if you're casting someone whose chosen one origin story is, I'm the chosen one, I have a note from my mommy, this is definitely the actor you want. Look guys, I mostly dug the first one, I actually like this one better, it's good, yeah, but it's also a Denis Villeneuve movie. The only sense of humor you're going to be getting, I have to bring. But yeah, I had a good time. For decades, everybody basically...
Ooh, I don't agree with that. Okay, that's one I disagree with on. I think Javier Bardem is is very funny in this movie. Like, very subtle dad humor, but I dig that because I love dad humor. So I can't argue with you. I can't agree with you on that one, Bob. But otherwise, this isn't a bad review so far.
He said Dune was unfilmable, and it basically is. Yeah, we've basically had to split the difference between two different versions. You got the David Lynch one that nailed the psychedelia, but had to lose the prospect of making any damn sense. And now we have these ones, which make sense to a fault, but kind of ignore the psychedelia part in favor of doing a more straightforward narrative. I like this one better than the first one. It works as more of a straightforward, propulsive war movie with a birth of a false cult religion net subplot than the first one did as a world.
Yeah, you know what? I have nothing really against this review so far. This is a good review. There's nothing really bad here. I mean, I don't agree with every point he's made so far, but it's just a decent review. There's nothing bad yet.
World building info dump with knife fights in the third act. Your mileage may vary on that, but I think that this is more of a solid working premise overall. I think to me, Night Shyamalan, who I know I tease at a lot, I still don't totally get the appeal overall, but he really works here for what he's given to do. He is good casting for this character as he comes into his own as someone who kind of keeps saying that he doesn't want any part of the role that he's being pushed into, but as soon as we have to get up to this point of, oh, but you kind of do, don't you, dude? Really sells the premise. And Zendaya has the slightly more difficult part where she's a POV character, but from outside of the character whom we're getting the actual point of view of.
Yeah, this is so far is a good review. I don't see anything bad yet.
Difficult angle and needle they're trying to thread, but it works. And overall, getting outside of all of the different houses, warring factions, stuff that most other stories take care of in a title crawl business that was so much of the first movie, and mostly making this one a centrally focused, propulsive action narrative, largely focused on two characters with cutaways to the machinations of the main bad guys and the build-up of the religious cult in the background, is a much more interesting, straightforward narrative. And if you are going to cut back on as much of the inner monologue and the psychedelia and the internal head trip stuff as they have, that's probably the way to go. It just works better. That works better for me. Something that doesn't totally work is that putting more focus into what world building we do get on the space nuns as the actual main players of the world building is a good idea. That makes sense, but they also want to keep them in the background and not really actually develop them as characters and make them these mysterious, like wraith-like background figures wandering around. Doesn't fully work. I feel like they should have picked a lane on that one, and they really don't. Maybe that's coming in the next one. We shall see. We get a lot more of Harkonnen Planet in this one. That looks great. Austin Butler, sorry man, you're no Sting, but then again, who is? Overall, I think this works better than the first one. I liked it. Gonna call this one a 7 out of 10. Check it out.
Okay, so I'm gonna point where I disagree with MovieBob here, but I will say this right now. I don't hate this review. It's a good review. I disagree with some elements of it, but it's good. I think for one, I think that Austin Butler's a better fade than Sting is. I think Sting is a little more memorable because of that bizarre freaking winged underwear thing he has, but like, he's still a good. Austin Butler's much better in the role. He's iconic. He is intimidating. He manages to match Stellan Skarsgård's like vocal patterns really well. It's a good performance. I think the only thing Bob says here that I disagree with really is about how is the role of Bene Gesserit. I think the Bene Gesserit really are good in this movie. You can tell they're playing a real four-dimensional game of chess where they have all these prospects that they're working on. And they're the undercurrents establishing fate as like an actual foil to Paul. You know, they kind of the role that the Reverend Mother plays. You realize that she's really behind everything. That she's the one playing the true game of chess. And characters like the Baron Harkonnen, who you think at first is the big bad, it gets put in perspective. You realize he's really just a smaller piece of a larger narrative where it's clear that he's reacting. He is a reactive figure. He is not the center antagonist. He's barely even he's almost like a small player in the vast scheme of the game. And that really comes through with the Baron Harkonnen in this. And you see the Reverend Mother, even the Emperor is secondary to her influence because she's the one who's holding his strings. I think the Bene Gesserit really work. And then with Lady Jessica, you see how she's kind of playing a counter game of chess. But in order to do that, she has to manipulate and control and dominate. And yes, it is to fulfill the promise she makes to Duke Leto to save her son with all the capabilities of the Reverend Mother, of the Bene Gesserit. Not just as Paul's mom, but also as a Bene Gesserit, woman. And that really comes into full play in this film. I think that's really incredible. Lady Jessica is one of those characters I think is very complex and very interesting. I think she's one of the better characters of the whole Dune saga, based purely on the nuance of her character, the complexity, but also the dangerous steps she'll take to defend her family. I think that's really incredible in a way that's both very sympathetic and very horrifying, especially in this film. Would have been better if Thufir thought she was a traitor, though. Just saying, but what are you going to do? No, so I disagree with Bob on a couple points, but this isn't bad. This is a good refresher between the really bad takes. So let's go with the one where they whitewashed Zendaya on the front thumbnail.
If there is a good thing about movies like The Marvels, or Madam Web, or Ghostbusters 2016, or even...
Wait, what? What does The Marvels, Madam Web, Ghostbusters 2016, and The Last Jedi have in common? They're completely different types of movies. Like, they're not even... Like, quality-wise, I think Madam Web is very entertaining if you go in with let's just say a green perspective. With green shaded lenses, the movie's fantastic. I'll just put it that way. The Marvels was fine. I like The Marvels. It was good. Not great, but it was good. Last Jedi, I think, is vastly overhated. And Ghostbusters 2016 I can't stand. For different reasons. I think Ghostbusters, all the sequels to Ghostbusters, I find morally reprehensible on some level. I know, because Harold Ramis spent his entire life trying to get Ghostbusters 3 made, and the moment he passes away, they make a new Ghostbusters movie. And then Bill Murray, who is the big holdout on all these films, comes back in. Like, that just rubs you the wrong way. The film itself is fine, but I can't morally support the film knowing the saga that led up to it. Like, knowing that, I just feel like Harold Ramis he was strung along for so long about Ghostbusters 3. Morally, I'm very upset with that move, with Ghostbusters. And that goes for Afterlife, too. That goes for the next one that's coming out. I just, ethically, these movies bother me because of the whole saga with Harold Ramis. And, Ghostbusters 2 is not that good either, but, I digress. Yeah, Madam Web's good to watch if you have the right mindset, we'll say. You have to get yourself in the right headspace for Madam Web. Anyway.
Star Wars The Last Jedi, it is that they're so easy to reject. Not only are they filled to the brim with subversive ideopolitical messaging, they're also objectively bad from a narrative point of view, which makes it all the easier for the audience to vote against them with their wallets. But
how are they objectively... You know what? Objective criticism, I think, in general is really stupid. It's really a dumb idea, because there is no such thing as an objectively bad film. Films are subjectively bad. If you don't like them, you don't like them, but that's okay. But they're not. There's nothing subjective. There's nothing objective about film criticism. All of it's subjective. And anyone who convinces themselves otherwise is lying to themselves. But I digress.
What if there's a movie that is actually good on its own merits, but which still has some of that divisive messaging? Well, there is such a movie, and that would be Dune Part 2.
I hate this edgy opening. It's so edgy.
This is not a review in the traditional sense, as I will not be providing any kind of beat-by-beat breakdown, but I will point out two moments which were...
Yeah, that's the other thing too. The Last Jedi was the highest grossing movie in 2017. They vote with their wallets by going to see it? What are you trying to say, dude? And thank you for pointing it out. I always forget, like, what was the most highest gross in that year?
So off-putting that they severely detracted from what was otherwise a great movie. Now I realize that many of you unabashedly love this movie and will as such not appreciate what I have to say, which is cool because I'm going to say it anyway. And to be clear, I don't blame anyone for liking this, which pretty much all my friends in this sphere of the internet do, because just like Dune Part 1, Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 is a cinematic achievement that transports you to another world and feels real. Seeing it on a sufficiently big screen with a properly calibrated sound system isn't just another blockbuster, but an experience.
It's amazing how he's saying so little.
I don't have one bad word about the execution, the scale, or the scope here. On the contrary, my issues are exclusively about some aspects of the script, some creative choices made, and the ensuing messaging. To illustrate...
Okay, we found it, guys. We found it. We found someone who I can already tell has a bad take. Let's watch.
Straight my point. I'm reminded of a clip that Yellow Flash alerted me to, where a game developer said the quiet part out loud.
Oh, so he's one of these guys.
Give people stuff you know they want, so you can inject things that maybe they aren't familiar with, or maybe they don't know they want, but make them like that stuff.
I feel that's what happened in this movie.
Wait, hang on. So, wait a second. So the clip that you're referring to shows a game developer saying to give players what they want, and if they give them what they like, then you can also include other details they may not know they want, but want. That's like basic storytelling. You don't always give the audience everything they want, but you do have to challenge them a little bit sometimes. You want to make a compelling piece of art. No, there should be some crowd-pleasing bits, but you should put in things that may not be as pleasant for them so they can experience a more nuanced perspective. Otherwise, it's like getting fast food, you know? Like, yeah, it tastes nice, but there's no substance behind it. And a good example of that would be Star Wars. You know, no one wanted, let's say, Empire Strikes Back for Luke just to lose. No one wanted that, but it led to a very compelling narrative. And just like with Dune, no one wanted Paul to be... People wanted to like Paul. People, when they read the first Dune book back in the 60s, people wanted Paul to be the hero. But Dune Messiah comes in and shows, hey, you know, here's the downside. And you know what? Audiences did not want that. They wanted a more fun story. But at the end of the day, they got something better when they were challenged. That's how it is. So you're acting as though, you know, and it has nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with representation. It's just simply storytelling. If you give people everything they want, the experience is sometimes a little hollow. It rings weak in some senses. But let's see what you're saying, because I think you're going to go into this whole. I think you know, and also Yellow Flash, you know, whatever. He's a.
Where the likes of Sweet Baby Inc. and others failed miserably at giving the audience something great with which to swallow down that bitter messaging pill, Denis Villeneuve actually succeeded at doing that. So, what am I talking about?
What is he talking about?
Well, the first is a dig at the audience, expressed through the Fremen, more specifically through Stilgar. The Fremen are mixed, but there is still the Northern Fremen and the Southern Fremen, and it would appear that the Northern Fremen look somewhat down on the Southern Fremen and see them as overtly religious hicks and yokels. They don't use those exact words in the movie, of course, but that is what it amounts to. Now,
Wait a second. Are you trying? Hang on. You know what? I'm gonna hold my words. But are you trying to imply that this is a North-South thing, like a Union Confederacy Civil War division, or are you trying to talk about the religious element of arguing religion is falsified and all that? Which one are you trying to go for? Because the Fremen represent the Middle East. They don't represent, and the religious beliefs that they are embodying were forced on them by colonialism. So if you're trying to assign American values in this sense, then you're wrong, because they were manipulated by colonial powers. If anything, you can compare them to Native Americans, but not. But I might be preemptive. I might be giving an uncharitable perspective of his perspectives. I don't think I am, but I could be mistaken. So let's take a look.
by no means claim to be an expert on the Dune universes like Danica or Quinn, and once we leave the Paul Atreides-centered books, my knowledge falls to that of a
Wait, hang on. Let me just look at which books you have there. So,
or Quinn, and once we leave the...
Okay, so you have Dune, the first book, Children of Dune, the third book, which is still... These two are both Paul Atreides. In fact, I think all of these books... No, Battle of... Oh, okay. Once you get to the Brian Herbert books, I always get a little hazy on which one's which. They all sound so similar. Battle of Corrin, was that during... I think that's with the Jihad book. I think Sands of Doom is like one of the interquels, I think. Yeah, so some of these books all have Paul Atreides in them. A couple of these books feature Atreides' household.
The Paul Atreides-centered books, my knowledge falls to that of a layman. Except the War Against the Thinking Machine books, I read those. But that...
Hang on a second. You didn't read God Emperor of Dune, but you read the Brian Herbert books? Why? God Emperor of Dune's so much better. I mean, again, whatever you have available is what you have available. That's fine. But, like, again, it's like, I don't know. Those books are just so. I'm not a fan. I've made this clear in the Dune video I made. I'm not a fan of the Brian Herbert books. I've read a few of them, and they all kind of blur together in my brain. They're not good.
Read those. But that aside, in the original book that this movie is an adaptation of, I don't seem to recall one tribe of Fremen speaking ill of another tribe of Fremen, for being just a little bit too religious and too hillbilly for their liking.
You should... Well, I just was rereading Dune Messiah, where in the third chapter of the book, you have the Fremen criticizing the jihad that Muad'Dib has put them under, and internally discussing it. Now, yes, the film takes some liberties, but he has to unite the various tribes anyway. Not all the tribes of the Fremen are united. He unites them, and that's done over the course of the time skip. But so again, he's not wrong in some senses that with the North and South tribe, that exact dichotomy isn't there, but it's also shown that they're fragmented, that they are societies that are interwoven, but they're not unified, like Paul unifies them. He has to do it through deeds and demonstrate his skills, but again...
On the contrary, I recall the Fremen being pretty united against the common enemy. In fact...
Okay. This is wrong, actually. They are united against the Harkonnens, but they also don't trust the House Atreides either. So, you're misremembering the book.
In fact, one of the main themes of the book is that the religious component to the Fremen seal is what makes them such an unstoppable fighting force that even the fiercest warriors of a complacent empire can't overcome them.
No, you're wrong. The thing about the Fremen that makes them so dangerous is that they survive on a desert planet. They figured out how to survive in the desert. Their blood congeals the moment it's drawn because their bodies have adapted to surviving in a desert. And the Sardaukar, living in a harsh planet, a prison planet, potentially, or a harsh environment. One of the reasons why Duke Leto Atreides believes he can form an army of Fremen is because the people of Arrakis, the Fremen, they are so adapted to the harshest conditions imaginable. They are a warrior culture who have fought to survive, who survive by riding the backs of sandworms. Like, these are people who have learned to become the strongest they are by their environmental factors. They are not the strongest because of their religious beliefs. The religious beliefs were instilled there by the Bene Gesserit. They were parts of the colonial system used to control the Fremen, should the Bene Gesserit ever need to use them for some nefarious purpose. So, you're wrong about Dune. Okay.
While each generation tends to forget it, that is something that has reverberated through our history, and that is why author Frank Herbert, a man who knew not just ecology but human nature, put it in the book in the first place. In this movie, however, that unity among Fremen just has to go, so that Hollywood, who see themselves as the enlightened warriors fighting against tyranny, can distance themselves somewhat from the deplorables among their own population. As the more perceptive of you may have noticed, I'm not American, but I don't see how that dig could be anything other than the fine Hollywood folk making a statement on their own neighbors residing in flyover land. Yes, I realize, of course, that Denis Villeneuve is also not American. He is a resident of the People's Republic of Canada. But this movie is nonetheless a product of Hollywood. So there's gonna...
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. You... Buddy. It's Iraq. It's about Iraq. Arrakis sounds just like Iraq. It's not about the South. It's not about Texas. It's not about the Trump voters. It's about colonial powers using their influences to manipulate people to draw resources from them. In the book, it's called a jihad. You think the South would use those terminologies to describe their holy war, their terrible purpose? The only way you could possibly make the argument that, no, you really can't, can you? Did the Middle Eastern imagery slip you by? Did you miss the Middle Eastern inspired music? The fact that all the Fremen are not white people? I mean, actually, is Javier Bardem, he's, I know he's Spanish, but is he... Anyway, point is, like, you can't have missed this information. How did you miss this so badly? How did you miss the point this much? Oh my goodness.
Gonna be plenty of influence that ends up...
Guy on points for creativity. He never could have seen a damn those coastal elites read coming. Yeah, like... And then who's the coastal elite? Are you gonna say that the Baron Harkonnen is the New Yorker? like what are you doing? How did you possibly come to this take? Like, I'm just stunned that any human being could ever miss the mark this badly. Okay.
On screen. But that was just one little thing that stuck out to me. There was another, which I equate with Luke Skywalker tossing the lightsaber over his shoulder and walking away from his legacy, and that would be the portrayal of the character Chani. Spoiler alert, do not proceed unless you either have seen the movie, or unless you've already been spoiled, or unless you
If you've watched this stream so far, you're doomed.
Everybody got that?
With spoilers, sorry.
Now that you've all been warned, let's move on. The book, Frank Herbert's Dune, ends with a victorious Paul Atreides dethroning the Emperor of the known universe, and in order to legitimize himself to the other great houses of the Landsraad, he marries the Emperor's daughter, Princess Irulan, thus forging an alliance between House Atreides and House Corrino, which has been the ruling family since the days of the Butlerian Jihad. In fact, it was the House of Butler that took on the name of Corrino.
Okay, come on. Okay, now you're going into the Kevin, the Brian Herbert books. Kevin J. Anderson almost said the Brian Herbert books with this whole nonsense, which, by the way, were not written at the time. The Butlerian Jihad in the original book was just rejecting computers. There was none of this war that you're referencing in the original books. That was all done afterwards, decades after the original Dune books were written. So your extra lore bit doesn't matter, anyway.
After their decisive victory over the machines at the Battle of Corrin. See, I read those books.
Yeah, those books don't matter,
the
so who cares?
significance here, at least in theory, is that by marrying Irulan Corrino, Paul Atreides is legitimized. Without that marriage, he is just a usurper that all the other houses, i.e. all the other rulers of the known universe, will be desperate to get rid of.
They are desperate to get rid of him, though. In the next book, Irulan conspires against him to overthrow him. Okay. And we know for a fact, even if all you've read is the first book, let's even assume that, there are all the visions that Paul has of his terrible purpose, of his jihad ravaging planets that do not fall in line with his authority. It's in the first book. Okay, but that happens, though. He does marry Irulan in order to hold a control over everything. But that's not even how he secures his victory. He secures his victory by threatening to destroy the spice. Because if he can destroy a thing, you can control a thing. And that's why the Chom navigators surrendered to him, and that's why how the Bene Gesserit surrendered to him. So you're just wrong. You're just objectively wrong.
Which, of course, they will be anyway. But this was a move to prevent that. Can't blame him for trying. There are historical parallels where it actually worked. That Frank Herbert put this into his book shows that he's a man who not only knows ecology and human nature, but history. Because that is indeed how alliances between nations used to be made, by way of marriage between each nation's nobility and aristocracy. And
why is he saying that like it's a profound thing? Everyone knows marriages between nations were political. Like, that's why Henry V married the Dauphin of France's daughter, is that it? It's like, this is like, he's acting like this is profound. Like, this isn't news, this isn't special, this is just standard history stuff. Everyone knows this. Why are you phrasing it like this? I don't know. He's making it sound like this is some profound detail when it's just basic historical knowledge. Frank Herbert was very learned. That is very true. He's a very intelligent man. He researched things. He was essentially, he knew what he was talking about. But to act as though this is somehow some like profound thing that Frank Herbert knew that marriages for political purposes were important, that it's missing the point to such a drastic degree.
sometimes a sufficiently powerful barbarian conqueror or invader. What about love, you wonder? Well, that was an optional extra, and having a lover or two on the side, or a concubine if you will, was tacitly accepted, as long as it was done discreetly. These marriages were after all political alliances, not expressions of any kind of true love, which indeed is something Princess Irulan never found with Paul. The inside joke of the book is that for the most part, she is the author of it, as most of the historical documents quoted in it were written by her, as she was trapped in a loveless arranged marriage, where she...
That's not really a joke, that's meant to illustrate the contrast between the histories written of Paul Muad'Dib and the reality. It's not a joke, it's a contrast. It's meant to show the long form of history. Because yes, you are correct. Frank Herbert was interested in history, but he saw it as the interesting thing he found about it was the contrast between real events and the recorded histories. How a figure is celebrated versus the realities of their day-to-day life, and the historical events therein that led to their accomplishments. Irulan's writing of these histories isn't a joke. It's a tragedy. It's not funny. It's sad. I don't understand how you missed all this. Because they're not subtle about it. But again, you're going to mention Chani eventually, but you're rambling about the basics of history. Let's see what you have to say.
Never saw her husband in name only, because Paul Atreides was with his concubine, his one true love Chani, whom history would remember as his wife. There's precedent for that even in Dune. Paul's parents were technically not married. Lady Jessica was the concubine of Duke Leto, but we all think of her as his wife.
No, we don't. We think of her as the royal concubine.
This is a pretty major theme in the book, and one that Chani, being a wise woman, has no trouble understanding, because there's a bigger picture at play. That's what happened in the book. That's what happened in the earlier adaptations, but that's not what happens in Dune Part 2. Here, expectations are subverted, because since its current year, this Chani is written as an egocentrical, entitled bitch, who is...
I'm sorry, what? 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 An egocentric... What? Okay. Let's hear you out. Why do you think Chani is egocentric?
Incapable of seeing the bigger picture. Yeah, the other great houses won't accept Paul anyway, but she doesn't know that at this time. All she knows is that her boyfriend is about to become the savior of her people, giving...
First off, no, she does know that they're going to attack, because she's there in the room when they say they're going to attack her. She leaves when she announces, and Paul announces the great holy war that has to extend the stars and continue warfare throughout the planets. Chani can see the bigger picture. That's why she leaves. Because she sees that Paul is using the religious institutions to control her people and force them into a war that they have no need to be involved in. they have no desire to be involved in until the religious organizations control that. And she recognizes that the Bene Gesserit created the religious systems of control to manipulate her people. This is explicit in both the text of the movie and the text of the Frank Herbert novel. The only difference there is that in the novel, Chani is a follower of Paul. She's okay with these pursuits. That's the big difference. It's not egotistical to not want to be with someone who is starting a war. And there's no benefit to the Fremen. Because, Chani believes that Paul will save them. Well, what is he saving them from, really? Really, what is Paul saving them from? He's saving them from the Harkonnens, okay. And he's instilling his own control instead. So, they get rid of the old boss, and in comes the new boss. How's that salvation? It doesn't matter what Paul says. It's clear to Chani that it's all a new system of control, and this system of control will get our people massacred, which it does. The jihad that spreads from planet to planet in Dune results in billions of deaths. Whole planets depopulated. So no, Chani leaving Paul is not an act of ego. It's an act of appreciation for her people. It's an act of appreciating the value of her life, of her people's lives. So it's not ego, it's awareness of the bigger picture. Chani does see the bigger picture. It's the rest of the people, aside from Paul and Lady Jessica and Irulan and the Bene Gesserits, who don't.
Giving them what they always dreamed of. He's about to change all their lives, and he's gonna do it all while staying at her side. But as a formality to seal the deal, he's gonna have to enter a political alliance, in adherence with a tradition that dates back to before their planets were even inhabited. Yet, the way this iteration of Chani has been written, that's a bridge too far, so she storms off, like the entitled Gen Z brats she must have been modeled after would. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a deleted scene of her filming a TikTok meltdown for victimhood brownie points. Chani storming off at this point is a major departure from the source material, and one that signals that for Dune Part 3, should it happen, all bets are off. That could be bad, and it could be good. But I will say that this kind of deviation from the source material, especially considering how it aligns with current year attitudes prevalent in Hollywood, does not fill me with confidence. That is a shame, because to me at least, this detracted from what otherwise would have been a fantastic movie.
So, you don't understand anything about Paul, do you? You don't get it. You totally missed the point of the movie. The point of the movie, and the book Dune that you're citing so intensely, is that Paul is not the hero. If anything, he's an even bigger villain than the Harkonnens in many respects. Because unlike the Harkonnens, who are overtly evil and overtly disturbing and overtly cruel, Paul's methodology is more subdued. He does deliberately inflict harm. Yes, it is for the golden path that he... that's actually Leto the Second is the golden path. Yes, it's to find his sliver of victory, a sliver of a good result for himself. But again, it's for himself. It's all self-motivated. He could call off the jihad. He doesn't. He could surrender the throne and, try to get a slower level of power. He doesn't have to marry the Princess Irulan. There are other options. He just chooses the one that is the most successful for himself and his terrible purpose. He chooses it despite the fact he knows for a fact that his decisions will result in the deaths of billions. He chooses that. That's more... He's responsible in the Dune books for more deaths than the Baron Harkonnen is. Think about that for a second. It is the direct actions of Paul that results in billions of lives lost. The Baron Harkonnen, nothing he ever... Now, granted, he is evil. He is a diabolical villain through and through, undeniable. But the Baron Harkonnen is not responsible for as many deaths as Paul directly is, or indirectly is, thanks to his jihad. And that is not accidental. That's a deliberate choice on Frank Herbert's part, to show us how even though he beat this bad guy, Paul has inherited the role of a tyrant, worse than the people he disposed. And the parallels between himself, the Baron Harkonnen, and the Emperor Corino, that is all, Shaddam IV, that's all deliberate and very intelligently woven into the narrative. Your interpretation of Dune is that it is a childish fantasy story where the bad guy is beaten by the hero, and this selfish girl, who knows why she's doing what she's doing? I don't understand it. She's just being entitled because I didn't get married to the guy I liked. That's beside the point. The repulsion of that is not so much... Johnny understands what's going on. She gets that. That's why she leaves. She understands the full scope of the situation. That Paul is using people as essentially pawns in his vast scheme, his terrible purpose. And that is something that the books relay perfectly. Yes, Chani still stays with Paul out of loyalty to Paul and still sees him as someone who she loves. And she still loves him in the films, but that is also mixed with the repulsion of his decisions, of his actions.
As it stands though, as much as I want this to be the definitive version of Dune, 2 movies into Denis Villeneuve's saga, I still prefer the 2 sci-fi miniseries for their adherence to the books, and the Spice Diver cut of the Lynch movie for one fully fledged theatrical experience. But am I being too hard on Dune Part 2?
Wait a second, you liked the sci-fi miniseries despite the fact that they expanded Irulan's role. Why are you okay with that, I wonder? That seems counterintuitive to what we're talking about with the original. And again, you're acting as though you're talking about having seen these in the recut of the... And again, that recut of the David Lynch Dune's pretty solid. I'm not going to lie. It's a solid recut. But you're acting like this is somehow completely... It's just bizarre. I don't get these freaking these guys sometimes.
Or do you think that maybe they succeeded in making us all swallow a bitter messaging pill by putting it into an otherwise great movie? If so, could we be seeing more of that going forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Here's a question for you. Why do you think that's a bitter pill? What part of that narrative choice is the bitter pill? Is it the fact that colonized people may oppose their colonizer, even if they come bearing benefits of sorts? Is it because you think that it's because you think that it's wrong for a woman to ever question her man? Or it's because you think that Gen Z is entitled and will reject the savior who comes to save us? Like, what is it that you particularly think is the bitter pill, my guy? And that's the thing also. Why did you make Chani so pale in your thumbnail? That's a design choice you had to deliberately choose. That's not so easy to do. You have to go in, you have to adjust all the filters and all that. You have to do all the little work, little bells and whistles. So why did you choose to do that? Why did you choose to do that? I can't imagine. I can't quite figure out what it is. I can't place my finger on it necessarily. I'll have to come back to you on that one. You're very thin. You're obviously saying what you're saying. You're showing your hand a little too much with this video. You're indicating that you think it's bad for some woman to make a statement that opposes the obvious colonizer. You think it's entitled that she values the safety of her people and recognizes the religious institutions of control for what they are. And in complaining about that, you are missing the point of the film and the book you're talking about. For someone who obsesses with the lore of the Brian Herbert books, you seem to miss the messaging of the Frank Herbert novels, which begs the question, do you even understand Dune if you don't understand that? You don't have to have read Dune Messiah to recognize the themes of Dune Messiah already present in the original book. I feel like Lord of the Rings benefits from a similar treatment to the Star Wars Dune. Yeah, honestly, it could. I can always do a Dune Lord of the Rings comparison down the road. I think there's a lot to mine there toward Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, just going to Lord of the Rings in general. Half my videos end up being partially about Lord of the Rings anyway, so I feel like that's important to mention. I think that's the I think that's probably the maximum of bad Dune takes I can take in one day. That was pretty bad. I'm a little stunned that anything else could be even remotely as bad as that take. Comparing Dune to the United States South is pretty much that's hard to top. But I guess I can always do one more. All right, let's do the. I've been kind of dodging this one until the end. Okay, what do I guess we'll go with Critical Drinker. I really don't like this channel, but we're gonna see what you have to say. Let's see what the movie we all needed. This is going to be one of those takes where he criticizes everyone else, but Dune is so great. And I'm going to have a bit of a counter argument here. I think but we'll see what he says. I think this is going to be a very interesting perspective, but I'm going to fundamentally disagree with it as well.
You know, sometimes things really do come along just when you need them most. Like that time I was out in Dundee one Sunday afternoon with my mates, sampling some fine ales, when one of them decided it would be a good idea to do shots of absinthe. This turned out to be a faulty premise, especially after 3 or 4 rounds, and by early evening we were all decidedly the worse for wear and contemplating the unthinkable, bailing out and going home early. No! Then, in our hour of need, we saw it. With our stomachs duly lined by a combination of cheap grilled meat of unknown origin, wilted salad and dodgy chili sauce, we were back on track and went on to have a blinding night out. And I really do mean blinding, because I'm pretty sure I lost the ability to see for—
What does any of this have to do with Dune? You are an eighth of the way through your video, and you haven't even mentioned the movie you're reviewing. People watch this guy? Okay.
Several days afterwards. Oh well, that's methanol poisoning for you. Anyway, my point is that 2024 isn't giving us a whole lot to be optimistic about in the world of cinema, being dominated by the festering dregs of the superhero genre and a series of cash grab sequels that nobody really wanted or asked for. And then, along came Dune.
What do you have against Planet of the Apes? Anyway.
Part 2, and just so like that dodgy kebab shop from my tortured intro, it's here to save the day. Only this movie won't give you violent explosive diarrhea powerful enough to crack the toilet bowl.
Yeah! He's really trying hard. Like, I guess I mean, nothing offensive yet. It just I don't know. I just want to get to the point of the review. This is like really, I don't know.
Yes, Dune Part 2 is here, and after sneaking into, an advanced screening, I'm pleased to say that it's everything I'd hoped for, plus a little extra. Yeah, there's a few little niggles here and there that I'll get into later, but for the most part, I think Denis Villeneuve delivered another visually stunning, thoughtful, mature, and well-crafted sci-fi movie with the kind of cast that most directors could only dream of, and provides a fitting conclusion to the Dune saga. Well, for now at least. Now, I absolutely don't want to spoil this one, so I'm going to keep my plot summary as brief and vague as possible. So grab your still suit, fill it up with high-grade alcohol, and let's do this! The movie picks up right after the events of the first film, with an exiled Paul Atreides and his mother Jessica now living amongst the nomadic Fremen. Paul wants to strike back at the Harkonnens who wiped out his entire family and deliver some good old-fashioned payback, and gradually he starts to attract more followers to his cause. The more time he spends with them, the more they begin to believe that he might be the promised messiah that'll lead them to paradise, their beliefs encouraged by Jessica, who becomes a kind of religious cult leader for them. Meanwhile, the Harkonnens tighten their grip on Arrakis, brutally repressing the population even as the Fremen threaten to undermine their control. But will Paul risk everything to free the planet from their brutal regime? And even if he does, what will it mean for the future of the galaxy? There's so many positive things I want to say about this movie that it's hard to know where to start. I mean, I guess we should probably get the superficial stuff out of the way by praising the visuals. And believe me, they deserve to be praised. Villeneuve has always been good at turning the screen into his canvas, producing visually striking scenes.
Okay, so it takes him a while to get to the point, but at least he's not, like, at least so far at least, he hasn't gone as far into the ridiculous as that some of the ones we've watched previously. I think he's kind of... I think he has like a little faith in his viewership if he has to throw all these like dumb jokes at the beginning to get their attention that aren't even relevant to the plot. But like, it just feels like he's rushing through the review now. It's a little weird. I'm not used to this kind of format of the jokey kind of nonsense.
And landscapes that stay with you long after the movie's over, and Dune 2 might be his finest work to date. This is exactly the kind of film that IMAX was created for, and a good example of CGI being carefully used to render things that just wouldn't be possible to do any other way. Honestly, there was times when I was happy to just sit back and allow the film to wash over me. Compare this to the gaudy, cluttered, overwhelming visual diarrhea masquerading as films these days, and you begin to understand just how powerful this technology is when it's properly used.
But that's, I don't know, I think, again, comparing Dune's effects, which accomplish a very different thing, to stuff like The Flash, which is obviously everyone is clowned on for having terrible effects. Like, it's just really weird. It's not the technology, it's the planning, it's the strategy, it's the artistry. You're praising the technology when you should be praising the artisans who crafted it. Again, this is a matter of a more complex element where I think CG is kind of dismissed sometimes by proponents of practical effects, by those who criticize the art form, but computer-generated imagery is such an important, complex system that it's... I feel like you're kind of missing the point with this one, buddy, but you know, what are you going to do?
The story, as far as I can tell, is surprisingly faithful to the book, and while they might have condensed certain things down and cut out other stuff for the sake of runtime and narrative streamlining, I can kind of understand why for the most part. And ultimately, the main themes of religious dogma and cult of personality manipulating the masses, the corruption of power, and the dangers of blind faith are well represented on screen. Paul absolutely isn't the infallible hero that people want to believe in so badly, and the more the film progresses, the more you begin to see the flaws in his personality that'll go on to have catastrophic consequences for the galaxy. Cast and performances are superb throughout. Timothée Chalamet's...
Okay. You know, I didn't expect a critical drinker to actually understand that Paul isn't the Messiah. I kind of expected him to have the opposite perspective on that. You know what? I'll take any victory I can get at this point. Anything that's pleasant, anything that's little less obviously terrible. Now, mind you, his personal perspectives and other things I have issues with. I think his dismissal of VFX artists is very, irritating, especially someone who appreciates the artistry of film. Yes, CG is clunky and it's ugly sometimes, but there's reasons why. Sometimes it's the planning that goes into a certain FX shot. Sometimes it's the weights. And I mentioned before that a lot of the effects in Dune work so because they're composited with real locations and use particle effects to conceal the imperfections of the CG. It's not the technology, it's the artistry. It's the techniques incorporated into the art, not the tech itself. But that's a minor nitpick I'm just harping on.
He's the kind of actor that I knew would be fine playing the shy, timid, boyish version of Paul in the first movie, but I wasn't convinced he'd have the gravitas to play the powerful, commanding military and religious leader that he has to become. Luckily though, I was completely wrong on that front. Chalamet's on top form throughout the movie, able to switch easily from pensive and regretful man pondering the dark future that lies ahead, to a ruthless and vengeful messiah willing to destroy anything that stands in his path. And thank fuck, the movie never makes him the butt of some cheap, humiliating jokes to try to ground him and make him more relatable. And he's perfect.
That's dumb. So, here's the thing. Yes, jokes that undercut the success of a character can be very silly and grating in the wrong hands, like all jokes can be. But arguing that humor is a bad thing, or making jokes about a character is bad, is really quite short-sighted, especially when they do that with Stilgar. But again,
perfectly balanced out by Austin Butler, whose star seems to be rapidly rising in Hollywood, and it's easy to see why. The guy's brilliant as the sadistic and brutally efficient Fayed, brought in by his uncle to crush the rebellion on Iraq.
It's Fade, but I mispronounce words all the time too. I find it funny though how you're only talking about the male leads, and you haven't mentioned Lady Jessica's, Rebecca Ferguson's portrayal, Zendaya's performance, but let's see what you have to say about that.
Once
sure there's no reason
all.
for that.
I'd be lying if I said I was a massive fan of Zendaya as an actor. I never really understood what all the fuss was about, and I find her annoying as fuck in the Spider-Man movies, but to her credit, she turned in a good performance in Dune Part 1, and stayed equally strong in Part 2. Her version of Chani is more questioning and independent than in the books, more willing to call Paul out on his bullshit, but the movie never tries to elevate her at the expense of him. If anything, she's actually pretty irrelevant to the central narrative, which kind of makes me wonder why she's front and center in so much of the media coverage.
Wait,
no,
what? Hang on, what? She's not irrelevant. She's the viewpoint through which we see Paul's hypocrisy. She's a major character. What do you mean by irrelevant? What is that? How do you define irrelevant? She's like the secondary lead in the entire back half of the film. That, I mean, kudos on you for recognizing a good performance when it comes, but like, that doesn't make any sense. She's not irrelevant to the film. She's front and center in the film. I feel, I'm a little confused by that. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it feels like you're watching a different film. Irrelevant. She teaches Paul how to survive in the desert in some cases, along with Stilgar in the first half. Fights in every single battle in the second half. And saves Paul's life when he drinks the water of the poison worm piss, as she so eloquently puts it. She offers a philosophical counter to Paul. Irrelevant seems like a weird commentary.
The real dramatic focus is on Jessica, Paul's mother, who does what the Bene Gesserit do best, sowing conspiracies and manipulating people behind the scenes to pave the way for more visible figures to rise to power. Meanwhile, she's wrestling with personal issues of her own and the growing realization that maybe she's created a force that she ultimately can't control. On the other hand,
she never thinks that, though. She never thinks that Paul's outside of her control. Quite the opposite. She's actually eager to control it. That's the thing with Lady Jessica that's so compelling. She doesn't think anything's outside of her control. Come the end of the movie, she's played a game of perfect chess against Paul. Against the Reverend Mother, using Paul. And protecting Paul at the same time. So it's odd that you're saying that interpretation of the character. That doesn't make much sense to me.
And Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken are both in the film, but honestly, they've got so little to do that they feel pretty superfluous for the most part. Also, it's a fucking baller move to cast someone like Anya Taylor-Joy in your movie and have her appear in a 10-second cameo that exists only in a dream. I mean, I assume they've got bigger plans for her in the next movie because the ending leaves the possibility of a sequel wide open. As it should. If I had to pick out some flaws, I'd say the writing doesn't come across as quite as smart, quite as polished and refined as the first film. The Harkonnens, for example, don't seem like the calculating, ruthlessly efficient tacticians they did in Part 1. They make poor military and political decisions, fail to perceive obvious threats, and put themselves in vulnerable positions that they absolutely shouldn't. The result is that you never really get the sense that they're a difficult enemy to overcome. And as much as I love the visuals and the...
That's the thing. The Baron Harkonnen only succeeds in the first film because they caught them by surprise. They had a really good, calculated, singular attack. And furthermore, in all of that, the Baron Harkonnen basically almost wins in one sense. He almost gets Fade to be the Emperor. That is his ultimate goal, to position Fade to be the Emperor. And even though he himself does not survive to witness that, he is a single knife's thrust away from winning in that sense. Even though he dies like an animal, as Paul so eloquently tells him to. That's not to say that the Baron is a... No, that being said, though, looking at the movie, you look at the military accomplishments, Raban is a bad tactician, because... He was a bad tactician in the first film. You know, he was just not a great tactician. But Fade comes in and, like, completely pushes the Fremen to the limit. He's the one who pushes them into a place of vulnerability. He exterminates he pushes them out of the north entirely based on pure military attack. So the Harkonnens are still a very intense threat. Raban is just foolish. Like, the Baron's a cunning tactician who ultimately is in over his head. Fade is dangerous, and Raban's foolish. But what it comes down to is that none of them are really in control. Everything that they had was always because of the Emperor's backing. And the Emperor is only acting because of the true chess master behind the scenes, which is the Reverend Mother, who is shown to be the real ultimate chess master behind everything. Who loses to Lady Jessica's chess mastering.
slow, dreamlike quality of his direction, there's times when Villeneuve's lack of pace can sometimes work against him. Like in one scene where the gang are told the location of a hidden arsenal of nuclear weapons to help even the odds. A different director would have just cut directly to the characters opening up the vault and recovering the bombs, but instead Villeneuve treats us to a long extended sequence of everyone looking at the spot in the mountains where the weapons are hidden, then Paul explaining all the things that he can blow up with them and agonising over whether to use them, and then...
You mean the scene where they joke that, that's a funny little bit of character dynamics between Stilgar and, Gurney Halleck. It's a decent character beat. It's not... There's slow paces in Dune, sure, but that's not really a point of contention I'd make.
Finally unlocking the vault and taking them out.
But I know you're just showing an example. I'm not trying to be uncharitable with your interpretation, but I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill.
It's unnecessary padding in a movie that's already pretty long, and I feel like that extra runtime could have been used to flesh out other characters like the Emperor and his daughter. Ah well, these are gripes for sure, but they're pretty minor ones, and they shouldn't detract from what's ultimately a very well directed, mature, thoughtful, and excellently crafted sci-fi movie. The kind of film we absolutely need more of these days, and the kind I definitely recommend to any fan of the genre. Dune 2 seems destined for great things, and well, I'm here for it. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Alright, so I've permanently damaged my YouTube algorithm. I am sure my spouse will be questioning why I have right-wingers in my feed. At this point, I'm going to have to cleanse this with, like, just bombarding the usual nonsense I watch on YouTube. But this was interesting. I'm surprised that The Critical Drinker ultimately was not the least... was the one I was least disagreed on. Obviously not, I thought he was wrong on a few points for sure, but his video was way better than thinking that the Fremen were an allegory for the Confederate states. That was extreme. So yeah, we've ran this for about 2.5 hours. I think I'm done for right now. I think I can rest my vocal cords after all that. I ran out of spiced whiskey a very long time ago. I'm not dumb enough to do absinthe shots. What are you, nuts? So, a couple housekeeping things. Later this week, I'll be releasing my next video. It will be anime-centric. Again, going back to the anime... in fact, my next couple of videos will be anime-themed. I have two very distinct points of discussion I want to have. One of which deals heavily with Studio Ghibli films. You'll see what it is momentarily, though. And by momentarily, I mean a couple days. Next week, it'll be a video, though, on anime piracy that I'm drafting right now. And then after that, if things go according to schedule, we'll be discussing a video on Magneto. But as we continue, these are subject to change as I'm drafting these. Most of these videos I make in the week before they come out. I do also want to make one quick statement that I think is important. Recently... I don't want to keep it during the stream itself because I think we should have fun here. As I understand it, I'm going to do a little... I believe that given the information on the James Summerton situation, if anyone's been keeping track of that, so far, I do not believe that it is confirmed what has happened to James Summerton, but for those of you who may not know, James Summerton released a very concerning message on social media where it sounded like he was threatening to inflict personal harm to himself. If anyone is in contact with James Summerton, please make sure to reach out to the proper authorities to make sure that he is safe, because no one should ever inflict harm to themselves. But I do believe it's very important to note that anyone who blames, say, AGramuglia or Todd in the Shadows for their videos criticizing James on his plagiarism and actions should not be held accountable. I think it's very important to note that whatever actions he takes is his own accountability, and no one should be blamed for his actions. But at the same time, I think collectively can say we hope he is well and safe. And frankly, I find this whole situation very tragic and sad, and I hope the best situation comes of it. But also that we can't start making assumptions based on what we hear, because it's hard to say what's going on even. Though that being said, though, people are saying that James Summerton's account was deactivated on Twitter, which couldn't have happened unless someone had access to it. So it's possible that he is very much well. But it's hard to say at this point. I'm hoping he's well. I hope he's well, and I hope that I hope he gets the help he needs, because, you know, even if he is a plagiarist who ripped off the works of friends of mine, you know, I think that it's important that he gets the help he needs. Anyway, I don't mean to leave this on a dour note, but that's the reality we live in, and life can be very hard sometimes. So, on an uplifting note, thank you so much for watching. I hope everything goes well with you right now. And I am going to spend the next several hours trying to fix my YouTube algorithm so I never have to see the Critical Drinker's name on my feed, if possible. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.